I'd like to call this People's Committee meeting to order. My name is Neil Saravanamutu. I am a member of the public. We are holding this People's Committee meeting because the City of Ottawa has not made it possible for people to delegate on Lansdowne, and particularly on the issue of a referendum. Before we go any further, I'd like to turn the floor over to my colleague, Kathleen Fitzpatrick, to give a land acknowledgement. Kathleen.
Thank you, Neil. So I'll just briefly introduce myself. I'm Dr. Kathleen Fitzpatrick. I've taught at Ottawa U, Carleton, the London School of Economics, and Bristol. Went to the heart of Empire to learn how to do a good land acknowledgement. So we are sitting on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe, and part of a good acknowledgement is recognizing that you're part of an ongoing nation-to-nation relationship with the First Nations, and that should always be included in events that affect them on their lands, which here means the City of Ottawa. So I thank you, Neil, for doing the right thing and getting a land acknowledgement from a person who has some sort of depth of knowledge.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. I'd like to thank everyone for being here. I'd like to say bienvenue à tout le monde. Aujourd'hui, vous êtes invités à faire vos présentations soit en anglais, soit en français. C'est votre choix. Before I open the floor to delegates, I'd just like to say a few introductory words about Lansdowne. It's important to remember that Lansdowne is a public park. This is a public park like any other park in the city. Now, it belongs to the people of Ottawa. What is different about Lansdowne is that part of the park has been reconfigured through a public-private partnership, with the Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group. Now, it's fair to say that PPP has been a financial failure. And that's why the city would like to invest a further $419 million into a Lansdowne 2.0 project. A number of people feel that that's a significant amount of money and should be put to a referendum to the people of Ottawa. $419 million on a stadium. People question whether that should be our priority when there's so many other pressing needs that this city faces. It's also important to know that the City of Ottawa and City Council will make a final decision on Lansdowne in October of this year, October 2025. So we will have a final go, no-go decision in October. And that's very important. This is not a done deal. This is still a file that could go either way. And it's important that the people of Ottawa have their opportunity to say how they feel about Lansdowne. So today we would invite members of the public to speak about how they feel about Lansdowne, whether they're proponents or opponents to the project, or whether they're just interested third parties. Everyone is welcome to speak at this People's Committee. We would encourage the City of Ottawa to make space and time available for the general public to make have more opportunities for public engagement on this file. There have been opportunities for engagement. However, I would assess those engagement opportunities as not meaningful and not substantial. We are looking for real engagement on a very important file to the City of Ottawa. On that note, I'd like to open the floor to delegates. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. My name is Margaret Buist, and I'm speaking today on behalf of a group of Ottawa citizens who are Ottawa Charge professional women's hockey team fans. We're a group from all wards of this city. Over the past 2 years, we've been delighted to watch the fan base grow and embrace the enormous impact of the Charge hockey team on this city. When Ottawa was one of 6 cities in North America chosen as a site for the new Professional Women's Hockey League, the PWHL, in 2023, we had no idea that the team would have flag raisings at City Hall, part of Bank Street named in their honor, or that they would draw record crowds to TD Place. But now we may be at risk of losing our team in the future if the plans for Lansdowne 2.0 go ahead with a smaller arena. TD Place holds over 8,000 fans for hockey games, and over the past 2 years it has been filled to capacity on many occasions, especially when the Charge made the finals for the Cup this past spring. We have the statistics, and the arena has never had fewer than 5,000 people attending a Charge game, even in a blizzard in February. That number is very important, 5,000, because that is the seating size of the proposed small arena at Lansdowne, should Council vote to accept it this fall. I'm not kidding when I say we could lose this team and all that it brings to this city if a small arena is built. There will be a significant impact on fans if 3,000 of us are not able to get tickets to charge home games. There's likely to be a huge impact on the team's finances as well if ticket prices, even if ticket prices are raised, which they will be with a 3,000 seat reduction in sales. The plan for the new arena has just over 5,000 regular seats for a hockey game. According to city staff, there'll be another 750 standing room only and 800 box seats. The entire second level of the planned arena is corporate boxes and bars. Let me tell you about charge games if you've not been to one. First, it is the most welcoming, diverse, and friendly sports event this city has ever seen. The arena is full of children, seniors, people of different abilities and racial backgrounds. The 2LBGTQI+ community has embraced the hockey experience like never before. This is not your usual hockey game. Ticket prices are affordable. People from all walks of life attend the games. The excitement, the cheering crowd, the fan experience is bar none. Ottawa is now known throughout the PWHL League as having the best, most loyal, and loudest fans. In fact, it was a marketing ploy used by the GM to try to attract new players this draft. This will change if 3,000 fewer of us attend and suits and corporate boxes take up the second level. The league expanded this year to 8 teams. Every single one will play in a much larger arena than the proposed small 5,000 seat one. Last year, Toronto and Montreal moved their teams to ones like ours to accommodate their fans. If the city builds a 5,000 seat hockey arena, it will be the size of arenas in small towns like Kingston, Barrie, and Oshawa, which don't and won't have PWHL teams. The future of women's professional sports is bright. It is popular. It is making money. It is drawing huge crowds, no matter the sport. It is growing, not downsizing. At the championship game this spring, when the cup was awarded, Billie Jean King, who's one of the founders of the league, said women's sports deserve the biggest stage. Our mayor, when asked about the plan for the small arena and the charge fan attendance being so high, said to the press, "You don't buy a dining room table for the size of the event you have on Christmas Day. You buy your dining room table for the size of the family who's going to be there eating dinner every night, not 1 or 2 times a year when you have a bigger crowd." Since then, the mayor has attended many charge games, and I know our fans have spoken to him. I've seen them doing it in the hallways and said, take back those comments and give us a larger arena. We charge fans are the family at the dinner table. We're there every game night, and our hockey games are not the only events that need a bigger arena. TD Place has hosted World Curling Championships, World Skating events, and many national events. These are not going to fill an NHL-sized 19,000-seat arena, nor is the charge, but we do fill an 8,000-seat arena. Whether it's a new right-sized arena or a renovated TD Place, there are many, many of us tax-paying hockey fans who want to make sure this city spends our money to keep the charge in Ottawa in an arena 8,000 strong. So to our mayor and council, we say adjust your budget, change your plans for TD Place, and make sure our Ottawa charge stays in Ottawa and plays to the largest possible crowd. Thank you.
Margaret, I'd like to thank you for your delegation. I have a question. You mentioned that we expect ticket prices will increase. What sort of impact would you think that would have on families and their ability to participate in charge games?
I think it'll have a big impact on our fans. When you go to a game, you see families, you see kids' hockey teams, seniors, people of all income levels. The ticket prices are affordable. A family of 4 can go out for a wonderful evening at a charge game and even eat while paying for a ticket. And so many people cannot afford games like the Senators. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important to keep those ticket prices down and to allow as many people as possible to attend a game.
A second question is, you mentioned that there are an expected 750 standing spots. Are you aware of any other arenas that house professional sports in North America that have that idea of standing spots at hockey games?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the Canadian Tire Place has standing. Many arenas have standing, but it's a real accessibility issue. I know I could not stand throughout a hockey game, nor would I want to. I mean, I could, but I don't want to. It's an accessibility issue, and that's another piece that Charge fans are really, really keen on. We want whatever arena is built to be accessible, fully accessible, economically, and for people of all abilities.
And just one final question. You mentioned that the Ottawa Charge should rightly be concerned that the number of seats that they could sell is less than what is currently the case, than what they're currently getting in terms of regular attendance, and that poses a risk of them leaving the city. What impact do you think it would have on the city if the Ottawa Charge were to leave because the stadium was no longer appropriate?
Well, personally, as an avid Charge fan, I would be devastated. And I think I would not be alone. Those games are extremely popular. People drive from Kingston, Cornwall, up the valley, Rockland to come and see the games. It's a huge draw, and it brings many people into Ottawa.
Great. Margaret, thank you very much for coming in and your delegation today.
Thank you for having this forum.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stick close to what I've got to say in case I run out of time, and then we can follow up with questions after. So, his worship of waffle, an ode to Mayor Sutcliffe, with apologies to Ottawa residents who still had hope. In a city where potholes form national parks and buses run like ghostly sparks, we crowned a mayor with podcast flair, but competence, you won't find it here. Mark Sutcliffe, mild of might, defender of the status light. He calls it governance, I call it fluff. Committees, delays, not much stuff. He speaks in spreadsheet charts and plans, yet action dies in cautious hands. A city manager, meek and slow, yet every yes disguised as a no. He gave us cameras, oh so kind, to find our wallets from behind. Safety first, he lofty pleads, while coffers bloat from phantom needs. 100 million raised in stealth by taxing speed, not taxing wealth. The city's dead, OC's a wreck, a daily bet, a losing trek. Trains stall more than teenage bands, and riders flee for safer lands. A deficit that grows each year, while Mark shrugs off each engineer. Reserves are drained, the coffers bare, but he still claims he's a fiscally fair. 3.9, the taxes climb. He promised 2. Was that a crime? He smiles while slicing through your pay, then says, it's just the Ottawa way. He gutted diversity race work, plain and quick, swapped real advice for optics slick. The voices lost, too bold, too true, so he replaced them with a crew of orgs who needs the city's purse, who nod and smile but never curse. No Arabs, Muslims, queer or Cree. Yes, just yes men in mockery. A working group not meant to bite. Just praise the mayor day and night. Oh, Lansdowne. The remake, non-requested. $500 million well invested? That's a question, by the way. A corporate gift, a public bill, while housing stuck in freeze and chill. We asked to vote, he ducked and ran. But Neil stood up and faced the plan. He called for ballots, called for truth, a referendums for the salutes. Then came Tiwin, Greenbelt theft, a deal so shady it smelled of grift. Land with no roads, no pipes, no plan. Yet somehow it got the mayor's fan. Developers danced, the chiefs got burned, and planning rules were overturned. Consultants nodded, logic bent, and still Mark called it excellent. And when Horizon named the game, the donor class cried out in shame. Not all themselves, but at the light that shone too close, too fierce, too right. They tried to bully, threaten, and sue for daring to reveal what was true. And Mark, he challenged with a passive grin, while silence bought his safety in. He said, no cash from builders here. My books are clean, my conscience clear. If you go to the Horizon website, you will see he took $100,000 and he held up his hands at the debates and said he never took any money. There's the facts there. My books are clean, my conscience clear, but facts like weeds tend to grow. And Horizon showed what he wouldn't show. 100,000 secret developer streams from housing barons funding dreams. He called it clean, what gall, what nerve, a planner's soul that curves to serve. But Neil, Neil, a sharper blade who cuts through games the mayor's played. He asked for fairness, public votes, while Sutcliffe buried budget notes. He stood for transit, downtown light, for queerer, greener, smarter might. And every time Mark hides or spins, Neil's there, reminding who really wins. So here we sit, tax broken sore. No homes, no buses, just a metaphor. He builds his fortress, locks the gate, and a bubble safe from public fate. When Sutcliffe shuts us out and walls go up to block the view, remember, friend, it's me and you. Leading us through this is Neil Sarabanamutu. So that's the first part, and then you have another 30 seconds. And this one is called, hang on. Da-da-da-da-da. Yeah. Here we are. This one's more specific to Tiwin. It's called Lansdowne 2.0, putting Ottawa into a ghetto. Remember the promises, the glass towers of lies, the backroom handshakes, the council's disguise. They call it revitalization, but we know the game. When rich men plan stadiums, it's the poor who take the blame. Lansdowne 2.0, sleek renderings in steel, but the soul of the city, that's not part of the deal. Another playground for condos for suits and champagne, while renters get priced out, evicted in shame. What do you call it when culture is sold? When voices of locals are left out in the cold? When the vendors are punished and the artists displaced, and only the wealthy can afford the space? It's not progress. It's theft with a plan. They fence off the commons and hand it to the man. Public lands become private gain, and Sutcliffe just smiles through your hunger and pain. Is this city for citizens or just a few? Ask Sarabanamutu, ask your neighbor, ask you. Because once that deal's signed and the towers arise, your skyline's a monument to municipal lies. So let the chant echo from Bank Street to the Hill. Lansdowne ain't progress, it's a tax-funded swill. And when Sutcliffe shuts the door on your truth, just remember who really answers to. Ghetto by design, exclusion by law. Ottawa sold out, and we all saw.
Well,
Thank you. So I wrote that because the pattern I've seen with this mayor is about shutting out voices, shutting out dissent. I sat on the advisory committee which helped us shape the framework on diversity. The mayor and the city council all agreed that they are going to continue with that. That took that vote, made that statement after the new council was elected. They subsequently deep dived it, didn't do anything for 2 years. Then the former committee members started to push him. And what they've done is they've created a new committee which no longer has any power.
great, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dewey, I want to thank you for your poem.
Thank you.
And I think I was included in that, so I thank you for that reference. In it, you refer to, and by the way, you don't have to answer in rhyme unless you want to. But you refer to some of the tax issues and some of the fiscal concerns here. So do I take it to say that Lansdowne would not be your top priority for spending? What would be for the city?
When you have people who can't afford a car, can't go to work because the buses are not working, and you're spending $500 million so people can go to a hockey game, those who are receiving that money are those who are funding the political campaigns. There's one city councilor is getting 99%. 99% of his money comes from the developers, and the other 1% comes from the wives of those developers.
Can I ask a question I'd like to ask all our delegates today, and that is if you could summarize your thoughts on Lansdowne in one sentence or even one phrase, what would that be?
It's turning Ottawa into a ghetto.
Thank you. Thank you for your delegation today.
Thank you.
So first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. It is really wonderful that you provided this. We're seeing too many things now, I think, that are going counter to democratic structures in many ways. So I think this kind of individually motivated occasion is wonderful. To introduce myself, my name is Tim Lash. I've been a glebe resident since the 1970s. I'm retired now. My employment has been with Environment Canada mostly. My education is a degree in environmental studies. I also have worked for the Science Council of Canada and for the IUCN, an international conservation NGO. In terms of activity in Ottawa, I became very involved in the Lansdowne 1 proposal and was increasingly surprised as it unfolded over time as a proposal at what was actually being involved. It was sold as something that was very green, and it was only very late in the game that a 3D representation of what was about to be built, that is to say, cutting down trees and putting up large towers. As a kind of an environmental planner, I'm very keen on doing intensification in general, as long as it's done well. And this is not being done well. And what I would like to do is say something about that under a few headings. As with Lansdowne 1, it does not appear to be being done well at all in terms of waterfall financing and the expectation that the city is going to be covering risk. Well, the benefit goes to one of the few large developers, again, in this city. So there's a kind of a privatization of a public asset, which has been public in two ways. One, it is open space for public use. It also has been providing at the Civic Center, before it was renamed, it was providing opportunities for people who wanted to get together as citizens to talk about anything they wanted to talk about at good price. We're losing those opportunities. We're losing public discussion spaces which citizens can be put together with. So I see Lansdowne 2 as a continuation of that, which I think is a bad trend these days. We do not need more individualization. I agree with what's been written by the Old Ottawa East in their briefs. I agree with what the Glebe Community Association has written, and I won't redo those. There's good stuff in terms of financial analysis and other kinds of analysis in there. So I do want to stick to my head points. The financial risk to taxpayers. Secondly, it's very wasteful, an asset that taxpayers have already bought. It's tearing down stuff, and it's not making anything better, as far as I can tell, for anybody in the public. It is providing more commercial opportunities for sports goers throughout the whole regional city, and wider than that. So that's a kind of a plus. But in terms of its location, it's not only intensifying the activity in one very small place in the city, whereas what we need activities spread out more widely. But it's doing it in a location which is trapped in the elbow of the canal. So we all know that Bank Street has become impassable on many days. Intensification is good, but it needs to be appropriately located, and that is not happening here. If you look around the glebe now, there's so many examples of appropriate intensification going on with multiple unit buildings that are at appropriate heights and so on. So that's the way that this stuff should be done, not a kind of a concentrated developer intensification. So it's bad it's a bad location for people to come to. It's a bad location for the people who live here, and also for the people who are coming, I believe. The final point I would make is that there are way better things that we ought to be doing with taxpayer money and with city planning effort. Sean Menard has recently mentioned some of those which are on everybody's mind: affordable housing, better transit. I'd like to mention one that seems to have dropped off the paper these days, and that is climate. We had in 2019, we had a good climate emergency plan declared by the city and planned out, including a set of targets and activities very well done by external forces. I was part of a group called Citizens Climate Council, and we prepared a report on that, and I'd be happy to provide that to anybody who wants. It essentially does, in a very understandable way, puts out what the climate targets are.
Great, thank you. Mr. Lash, thank you very much for your delegation. I'd like to ask you a question about, you mentioned about Lansdowne 1.0, that you said that the proposal came forward as one thing and what resulted was a different thing. We were sold a different, what was delivered was different than what was promised. Is that a concern for you with Lansdowne 2.0?
I believe it is, and I think, for example, it's only recently that we've been finding out that the financial details are not as expected, and even for the ones that are laid out, they're not really making sense in terms of what the auditor has said. I'm afraid I'm not aware, but I don't know. There have been several models proposed for what the whole development might look like with 3D models of the buildings, but I haven't seen one from OSEG. Has that been done?
Not to my knowledge, no.
I have seen one that's been done that is actually kind of scary in terms of the size of the buildings. This was, I think, in 2022. It was put together by a group, but very well done. And for example, it looks like it's going to be cutting out sunlight from most of the main mall that leads down to the Cattle Palace. So it would be very good, I think, in any kind of public planning to have 3D models and accessible, criticizable, answerable financial models.
Mr. Flash, you mentioned that you live in the Glebe.
I do.
And one of the concerns around this project is that the local neighborhoods are just opposing it because they're resisting change. Now, you've talked about intensification, and I think you said that this is an example where intensification is not done well, not appropriately located.
That's my view.
So is it fair to say that, what is your sense on whether neighborhoods like the Glebe, should they be further intensified? Should there be more people living there, or?
We don't have a choice, is my view.
Yeah.
We don't have a choice at all. And it may even, it depends what impacts housing affordability is partly the profiteering out of land, which is actually a common resource in terms of space.
Right.
So it's become too expensive for most people, including me, to live on the land that used to be, the amount of land that used to be affordable 2 decades ago.
Right.
So yes, we do need to intensify.
Okay. Can I ask one last question? And that is, if you were asked to summarize your concerns about Lansdowne in one sentence or even in one phrase, how would you characterize that?
Thanks for that. Give me a second.
Sure.
My concern is that development planning has gotten out of reach of the local control that's needed, and I think that's partly because of the amalgamation of rural with the downtown or the city wards. So I would say that's it. I'd say what's gone wrong is structuring of council decisions relative to a more balanced set of public concerns.
Great. Thank you very much for coming in. Thank you for your delegation.
Pleasure.
Hello, I'm Angela Davis. I'm glad to see people I know, and I am thrilled with what I have heard. I don't feel like I have the scientific or the financial wisdom, but what I would like to speak to is creating a good home for the citizens in Ottawa, the people who come here. What I'm thinking now, which is a little bit different than before, is what are the financial stressors at this time for this project? I feel 5% of our GDP has to go to military. I feel like we have food insecurity, the cost of goods and services, housing, refugees, and transport, which are big problems for Ottawa. Since I want a good city for all people, for us to get along and build a good community, these are some answers that Lansdowne ought to be considering, but the alarm bells go off. $50 million that we don't have, and we need it for...
Please shout.
Oh, shout. Oh, I can. What if I stand up? Will it be better?
Yeah.
It will? Okay. I would like the $50 million to be used wisely and be used for the cities, for the citizens in Ottawa. We have a city and people we've elected to look after the needs of our city. And I am concerned that 50 million debt, 500 million, thank you, $500 million. Right. Lansdowne is proposing housing for the affluent. And I want a community of mixed levels, not just for the affluent. I don't want that. The infrastructure we need, yeah, probably for the sports facility, but we have also other infrastructure needs like community centers, soccer fields, things that everybody needs, and I can't spend it all on the one place. The infrastructure also of for the young people. So if Lansdowne could accommodate young groups, children or teenage groups, that would help me. Transportation is a problem, and I can't see anything that's been improved by Lansdowne in the plans. I want homes for all. I would like to say what was done in the first section. The metaphor is they planted trees in holes this large, and they're dying. I think their project is dying. I would like life. And if you look around Lansdowne, when I go by on my bike, I live on the other side of the canal, so it's full of people, full of young people and families doing all sorts of things, but it's pretty dead around Lansdowne. So I would like something for everybody. Services and areas for community. I don't see like a community center or a hub, or maybe a place for refugees to get support in that community. That's it, I think. I just want it to look like a city that serves everybody, not the rich, but not just the poor. It's not ghettos.
Thank you very much for your delegation. Can I ask you, you mentioned that when you're on your bicycle, you noticed some areas where there was a lot of activity. Are you referring to the back of Lansdowne where the...
Well, at the back sometimes is full, not always, but the park right beside it.
Okay.
I should be good to know the name, but it's full of people. And they've taken some of that property away last year, but we have to keep it where people go. And I also like to interview the people that are going and say what they would want.
Yeah. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
About, you mentioned the housing that you'd like to see mixed housing for everyone. What's being proposed does not fit that bill?
It's the opposite. God, it's so scary. I mean, my house costs too much for me to live in, and we need housing. But if it's going to have to be up a certain number of floors, if it's going to be 2 or 3 big, couldn't we have some floors of people with minimum? Everybody has to buy a house. Our children need to buy houses. And I mean, it has become too expensive. But I can't do anything about that. But we could do better. We could look after our people better.
Can I ask a final question? It's the same question I'm asking everybody.
One sentence.
And that is, if you were to summarize your concerns about Lansdowne in one sentence or even in one phrase, how would you describe your concerns about Lansdowne?
I would like to model a community that includes Indigenous people's voices, because they do a nice job of settling things. I would like it to meet many people's needs. Across the street is Abbotsford. So we can look after a whole bunch of seniors. They could go there for their entertainment. We can do different things, but I want it at the human scale. I want it to represent not another military zone, not a shopping mall. I want to do something for people.
Great.
So that's a long sentence, sorry.
Okay, Ms. Davis, thank you very much for your delegation today.
Thank you, it was a privilege.
Hello, I'm Dr. Fitzpatrick. I did the land acknowledgement, so it's probably not surprising that maybe I'm going to raise some Indigenous issues, although I'm not Indigenous myself. I've been working in Canadian Indigenous reconciliation for over 30 years, since I was a little girl, actually. But seeing how there's not an Indigenous person to speak, I'm going to speak to some of the concerns as a treaty ally. We're all treaty allies, and all development projects that take place in the National Capital Region, of which Ottawa is part, and as Ottawa itself, as a public institution, has, and they always forget this, but they have a constitutional duty to have consultations and meaningful consultations with Indigenous leadership for any major project that they undertake within the bounds of the public domain. So it's very important. The City of Ottawa has a culture and heritage Indigenous staffing, I wonder if they ever speak to them about anything that has to do with major developments. You know, it's more than just dress, dinner, and dance and a nice feast for a public holiday. It has to do with meaningful consultation and accommodation. And they have a model for it. They sort of did it with the ZB, that involved the Algonquin. But for the most part, they've been tending instead now to use the Algonquins of Ontario as an organization when they want to do consultations. They're doing that with the library, they're doing that with the new Senators Arena on the Breton Flats, etc. But the problem, and Taywin development is also in relationship with the Algonquins of Ontario. Now, what the general public probably doesn't know, and as a professor, I can tell you, the AOO, while it's a beginning and a start and a worthwhile organization, it is not the only representative of Algonquin interests in this area. It represents Pikwakanagan on the Ontario side and a bunch of newly formed First Nation groups that were created as a result of the federal treaty negotiation that's going on in the area. But they don't represent the 9 Algonquin communities that are in Quebec because of the provincial barrier. But in Indigenous ways of knowing things, the river is not a boundary, you know, it's a transportation and visiting highway. So all of the First Nations in the Quebec side use, or did use, and still use, stuff in the National Capital Region. And they have a duty to consult with the tribal association that represents those 10 bands, those 10 First Nation in the National Capital Region. And I don't know what the status of their consultations regarding to Lansdowne is, but I can guesstimate that it's probably 0 to none. So that is very, very important. And Canada has signed up to UNDRIP. We have a responsibility internationally. We have a responsibility constitutionally. We have a moral and a legal need to do things in the proper way. And it would enhance the projects because it would make it then open for a more ordinary grassroots community, because as these projects generally unfold, they benefit, as many people here are going to say, elite groups, developers, people that can afford to go to the fancy restaurants and the Whole Foods and spend $50 to $100 on a night out with the friends. Where are the people? Where are the families? I'm old enough to remember Ottawa back when it was a lovely park. We had the agricultural fair and we had, you know, corn dogs and popcorn and nice places that the family could go. Well, we were opposed to Lansdowne 1 because we would know it would turn it into a place that didn't feel welcoming for these kinds of socioeconomic levels, that there would be a beginning of an elitism that is going to not exclude people by direct legal, you cannot go here, but just exclude people because they don't feel like it belongs to them anymore. They don't feel comfortable with their ability to use that public space. And that is the exact opposite of what we need. Public space for public purpose, not for corporate profit. It's very simple, but yet they don't seem to get the message. So, I mean, that's mostly what I wanted to say.
Dr. Fitzpatrick, thank you very much for your delegation. Can I ask you, can you explain a little bit more about, you mentioned the Algonquins of Ontario.
Yes.
And there's another 9 Algonquin tribes on the Quebec side.
Yes.
To the best of your understanding, you think that the negotiation has happened with the AOO?
I have no idea, but it's possible because the AOO is very involved with City Hall, and they have been working with them to create, like you might have noticed along the parkway, the NCC lands, there's lots of Algonquin cultural statues and education things coming into play. And I know for a fact that there's 2 First Nations people on the committee that deals with the senator thing at the Breton Flats. And of course, the AOO was heavily involved with Taywin as a reconciliation project.
Right.
But the Algonquins of Ontario, well, a legitimate group. No one's wanted to take anything away from the Algonquins of Ontario. But the problem is you can't just divide and conquer a la colonial tactics from time immemorial.
Can I ask another question about, you mentioned public spaces for public purpose.
Yes.
Are you aware that part of the proposal is that along Exhibition Way, like the main strip through Lansdowne that leads right up to the Aberdeen Pavilion, are you aware that the proposal is actually to sell that land with the expectation that we can buy it back later? So we'd sell it to the developer so they can build the podium, put the towers on top of it, with the expectation that we'd be able to buy it back later.
Why would we want to rebuy something that we already own?
Well,
This makes no sense to me. And you talk about towers. I second what the previous speaker spoke about. When we have an opioid crisis, a transportation crisis, a housing crisis, you're going to create police stations for the ultra-rich 1% and leave the rest of us to what? Wait their tables?
Can I ask you the question I'm asking everyone else? If you were to summarize your concerns with the Lansdowne proposal in one sentence, or preferably even one phrase, what would it be?
Public-private partnership is a poison pill for all people.
Well, thank you for the piece. Thank you, Dr.
Hi, my name is Richard Moon, and I'm here on behalf of Reimagine Ottawa. For those that don't know the organization, Reimagine Ottawa is a nonpartisan, all-volunteer organization that strives and, in effect, wants to dedicate its energies to promoting excellence, integrity, and accountability in city planning. And that's why Reimagine Ottawa is here being represented. I'd like to thank the organizers for giving us an opportunity to speak, and I like the term People's Committee. However, I'm going to be taking a different tact. I'm going to be directing my delegation to the council members and to the mayor. And I'm going to start now. Lansdowne appears to be shaping up to be another costly public bailout to the Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group, OSEG, the same group behind the first Lansdowne deal that didn't deliver what was promised. That is now, unless the city revisits what is being referred to by many as the one option only boondoggle. I'm here to remind the council of a letter that I sent to you on May 2nd, 2024. It was sent to the Auditor General, to all of you, but I don't believe it received the attention that it warranted. So let me put its core message before you clearly and publicly. That letter cited a major 2023 peer-reviewed literature review in the Journal of Economic Surveys. It examined more than 130 studies across 30 years and multiple North American cities, all focused on the economic impact of publicly funded pro-sport facilities. The conclusion: overwhelming, consistent, and damning. These kinds of projects fail to bring the real economic benefits to the cities that pay for them. That's the broad expert consensus from economists, financial analysts, and public policy scholars across North America. And yet here in Ottawa, we're being asked to pour hundreds of millions of public monies into Lansdowne based on the projections from OSEG failing that first time, and that are not only unverified, given the times that we live in, a period of stagflation and soaring construction costs, but based on overly optimistic assumptions confirmed by the auditors. Worse still, a longitudinal study done by these researchers suggests that the impact of such a project may not be just negligible, but negative. We've already saw the writing on the wall with Lansdowne 1.0. It didn't deliver the promised revenues. The city admitted as much, which is why the last council committed to rethinking the model. So how are we back here again with a bigger price tag, fewer answers, and again, the one option only project? I repeat, one option only, put forth by city staff, which is, let's face it, to bail out OSEG. I think you'll recall, fellow councillors and mayor, that there was no unified call for other options, including reparations to the site, which would have been a fraction of the cost. So this disconnect between expert research and the evidence of the Lansdowne 2 proposal during these precarious economic times, which have already been referenced, could not be more stark. Especially now when the city faces massive infrastructure deficits, stretched budgets across 24 wards at an unprecedented and uncertain period right now. And who knows what it's going to be like in the long future projection of 2066. So let's ask ourselves, what could your share of this debt buy for your constituents? How many long-stalled community projects could be advanced? How much urgent local infrastructure could be repaired? The public deserves prioritization of these expenditures grounded in facts, not public pitches or sales pitches, which in fact the researchers also warned about. In other words, these slick reports and spin, which they call promotional literature, that oversell the benefits and downplay the costs. These reports aren't meant to inform you, the public, they're meant to sell the project. So I'm urging you, Mayor and councillors, to heed the call. Do not approve a single dollar more for Lansdowne without subjecting this one option only to public scrutiny, and to investigate fully and transparently alternative options, which, let's face it, were never considered by city staff despite the requests. So this is, I believe, your duty. This is what stewardship is all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, for your delegation. Can I ask, on that point of one option only, what's your sense of why we only look at one option? And then the second part of the question is, what might other options look like?
Well, in fact, I don't know how anyone in the right mind, in a state of the world that we're in right now, would ever recommend a one option only, other than some kind of prearranged arrangement to be able to help out a sports facility organizer like OSEG. It's well beyond me. It is something that took place in the former council, so I'm not sure we'll ever know, and especially because of the commercial confidentiality that is always waved in our face in terms of when we ask for certain information, financial or otherwise, that we're not able to get that. In terms of options, well, for one, I'd like to go and in fact call for an architect review, perhaps a bid to those who could in fact come in and select what is best for the space and what could in fact accommodate what in this nation's capital needs.
Okay. Can I ask you, you mentioned that the question you had for councillors is, what could your share, your ward's share of this total project cost do for that ward? What's your sense is about the number that we're talking about per ward?
Well, I mean, if you look at the 24 wards and you look at the 500 million, $20 million would probably be the sweet spot. $20 million that could in fact build an arena in one ward, could in fact repair the dwindling rec center in another, not to mention the state of roads and sidewalks. I mean, there are those things that I know would be in a queue for consideration, but that would take forever for it to come to fruition.
Yeah, and you know, I have to say, when I think of $20 million, what that makes me think of is the cost, speaking of Lansdowne, the cost of the Flora footbridge. If I remember, that was in about the $20 million range.
Yeah.
And so we see how transformative that project has been to that neighborhood and that community. And what I think what you're suggesting is that we could have equally transformative projects across the city.
Yeah, and I think if given the opportunity, community associations across all wards would in fact identify what in fact those priorities are and where public engagement would truly take place.
Final question, Richard, same question I ask everyone. If you could summarize your thoughts on the Lansdowne project in one sentence or even one phrase, what would it be?
That's very easy. A one option only boondoggle.
Thank you. Thank you for your delegation.
There's an awful lot wrong with Lansdowne 2.0. City Councillor Sean Menard, in an op-ed in the Ottawa Citizen, June 10th, laid it out very plainly. The city will needlessly be spending close to $500 million to tear down the existing Northside Stadium stands and retail shops, structures that could last another 40 years, to build a new Northside stand without a roof and accommodating 3,000 fewer seats. In addition, 58,000 square feet of green space in the Great Lawn and Berm area will be torn out to make room for a new event center that will have 3,000 fewer seats than the existing center, effectively locking out a significant number of fans of the popular Ottawa Charge hockey team for every game. What is worse, though, is that to help pay for all this, the Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group, OSEG, and the city proposed to build 2 high-rise towers, one 40 stories tall, in the middle of our park, over the north side stands. What were they thinking when they came up with this scheme? And how well can we trust this gang that has recorded losses on Lansdowne for 10 consecutive years now? This year's losses, $9.2 million. So there's a lot wrong with Lansdowne 2.0. It has been widely criticized across the city, but still, Mayor Sutcliffe and City Council seem hell-bent on pursuing this unneeded and irresponsible project. Yet there's one other issue that may give some pause to City Council, and this relates to the World Heritage Site designation that the Rideau Canal was awarded in 2007. In recent months, 2 UNESCO sites in Atlantic Canada were cautioned to make changes or risk losing their UNESCO Global Geoparks designation. Geoparks are reevaluated every 4 years by UNESCO. Similarly, UNESCO World Heritage Sites, which include our Rideau Canal, are regularly reviewed by UNESCO to ensure that they are protected for future generations to appreciate and enjoy. This means that no activities can be carried out that might negatively impact the quality of the site. While few UNESCO sites have been deregistered, this has happened. An example is the Dresden Elbe Valley in Germany, which was deregistered due to the building of a 4-lane bridge in the heart of the valley, which meant that the property failed, according to UNESCO, to keep its outstanding universal value as inscribed. Closer to home, in 2024, the proposed construction of a 3rd bridge between Quebec City and Lévis sparked concerns about the potential impact on the UNESCO World Heritage Site designation of Old Quebec. This was because of concerns that the location of the proposed bridge would clash with a historic Old Quebec neighborhood. So, given all this, what could be the concern about the Rideau Canal's World Heritage Site status? Well, that just might be Lansdowne 2.0, whose key component includes the construction of 2 high-rise towers adjacent to the canal. Given that the current sight lines along the canal include no significantly tall structures, a 40-story building dropped down beside the canal will create a glaring eyesore up and down its entire length. Will that be a cause for concern when UNESCO next comes calling? It just may be. But one thing we know for sure is that when the Mayor and City Council approve Lansdowne 2.0 in October, this city will be stuck with 2 soulless structures that will scar the skyline of our World Heritage Site for generations to come. There is still time to fix this, time to pressure every city councillor to vote against this ill-advised and costly venture. Do the right thing, City Council. Those of us here today will be gratified, and everyone else will be astonished. Thank you.
Mr. Bonder, thank you for your delegation. Can I begin by asking you to answer your own question, which is, what were they thinking when they came up with this scheme? What do you think they were thinking?
Well, they did it to help finance the project. That's the explanation for these 2 high-rises. I don't know the details of that, the economics of it, but all I'm concerned about is the fact that it's inconceivable that something like this could even be considered, building these two high-rises in a city park.
Well, can I ask you about these two towers? Because we do have a housing crisis, and a lot of families are unable to find any sort of affordable housing. Are these towers not a part of that solution?
You could put two towers anywhere in the city. You don't have to plunk them down in the middle of our iconic park. You could build lots of housing at Tunney's Pasture, lots of places, but not in our park.
Can I ask, are you aware of any other city parks in Ottawa where we have built, taken over part of the park to build housing?
I'm not sure, but I can't see that the city or anyone would be building buildings in a park.
Yeah.
Just doesn't make sense. The park is there for a purpose, and most parks we let be. We try to improve them.
Okay. Can I end with my question I have for everyone, which is, if you were to characterize Lansdowne in one sentence or even one phrase, what would it be?
Lansdowne 2.0, a great deal for developers, a great loss for the city.
Thank you very much for your delegation today, Mr. Ponder.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Katz. I want to rebut the mayor's claim that there's no need for a referendum on Lansdowne 2.0 because something like everybody knew about it when the last municipal election was held. First of all, the fact is that almost nobody in Ottawa even knew that there was a plan to have another major redevelopment of Lansdowne Park. And of those who had heard about it, few knew anything about the financial implications, which will affect every City of Ottawa taxpayer for the next 40 years, long after the shiny new facilities are no longer shiny or new. Even in the Ecos poll that was commissioned by OSEG to ask people if they would like to get a bunch of nice new facilities, only 30% thought that the Lansdowne 2 proposal represented good value for money. This was question 13C. One fact that Frank Graves neglected to mention when he gave his presentation to a city committee in November 2023 that was considering whether to move forward with Lansdowne 2. At that city committee's hearings, there were presentations of both pro and con. The presenters in favor of Lansdowne 2.0 mainly liked the idea of having newer and better sports facilities. Not one of them ever mentioned the cost of the proposal. Since then, a number of facts have surfaced regarding problems with the proposed sports facilities. The most glaring of these, as we've already heard, is the fact that the proposed new hockey arena will have fewer seats than the number of fans that are already attending games of the Professional Women's Hockey League. Lansdowne 2.0 will be replacing a 9,500-seat arena with a 5,500-seat arena. It will be obsolete before it even opens. Then there's the sweetheart real estate deal that may be what the Lansdowne 2.0 proposal is really all about. The Lansdowne 2 proposal includes a plan to build two major luxury high-rise residential towers of up to 40 stories high on what is now public parkland. The city will be selling the rights to build these towers to a private developer. It is worth mentioning that Minto, a major Ottawa developer, is part of OSEG, and that it was OSEG that developed the plan for Lansdowne 2.0 and presented it to the city. There was no competition. Given the size of the project, hundreds of millions of dollars, one would think that it would be appropriate to have a competition. This is particularly the case since OSEG was responsible for Lansdowne 1, which was supposed to make money for the city, but in the 10 years or so that it's been in place, has only cost the city money. And it's worth noting that for Lansdowne 2, it's the city that is responsible for any construction cost overruns. Some of the financial details of the project are kind of mind-boggling. The plan is that the city will finance the project as a capital expenditure and it will incur debt to pay for it. City staff claim that the debt repayment costs will be something like $16.4 million a year, and that may have changed, but that it will be offset by a number of sources of revenue to bring it down to only about $5 million a year. One source of money that the plan calls for to supposedly offset the projected $16.4 million annual cost to Ottawa taxpayers sounds like sleight of hand. The plan is that 75% of the property tax collected from the high-rise residential towers will go into a special fund. Then that special fund will go to supposedly offset part of the $16.4 million that is to be paid from everybody's property taxes. This is ridiculous. property tax is property tax. They aren't offsetting anything with this scheme. Another questionable financial aspect of the proposal involves underground parking to be built by the city under one of its structures that will be exclusively available to the residents of the luxury high-rise towers. The cost of building this underground parking is in addition to the estimate of $419 million for the total project. In addition, city staff estimate that this parking will require a city subsidy of something like $600,000 a year. Why would the city even think of such a thing? Then there's the cost of borrowing the money, which city staff projects will be at 4.5% for the 40 years. And finally, there's the city's record of underestimating what things are going to end up costing. I have heard that the cost of the new library building is something like 3 times as much as the city's original estimates. That would put the eventual cost of Lansdowne 2.0 well over $1 billion. Then there are the other issues like the loss of parkland and the disruptive effects of 7 to 10 years of heavy, noisy construction on the neighborhood and on people's enjoyment of Lansdowne Park while all this is going on. The people of Ottawa should have the opportunity to decide if this is really what they want City Council to be spending their money on. Holding a referendum is the most honest way to do so.
Sharon, thank you for your delegation. I know you're a highly engaged individual on municipal issues. And I want to ask you, from your recollection, like the mayor has talked about, during the last election, Lansdowne was a live issue. Do you actually remember Lansdowne ever being mentioned during the election? Was it ever an election issue?
To the best of my knowledge, anytime I've talked to anybody, I've mentioned the word Lansdowne, like I've gotten a blank look. Like nobody knew anything about what was happening. So this idea that it was an election issue is bogus. Like it, I'd like him to show me one time where it was ever, you know, in a newspaper article or a, you know, media event. Like there was no mention of it. Has tried to not have anything talked about it. Like there was at one point, and I forget what the event was, Alan Neil on CBC interviewed Mayor Sutcliffe. There was some mention of, you know, opposition to Lansdowne, and Sutcliffe just tried to just brush it away as if, you know, nobody's bothered by Lansdowne. So it wasn't part of the election, and most people still don't know anything about it. Hopefully these hearings will help.
Okay, can I ask you about the issue you mentioned about property taxes? And you mentioned that 75% of the property taxes on the new residences at Lansdowne would go towards servicing debt. So now we also know that when on our tax bills, on our municipal tax bills, 25% of that bill actually goes directly to the province, 10% for education, and 15% for provincially mandated programs. So if 25% is going essentially to provincial programs, 75% is going to pay down the Lansdowne debt. Who is paying for the services of those new residents at Lansdowne? Or in fact, us. Yeah.
Well, okay, the whole thing seems like they're saying, well, this will go directly to, you know, paying off the debt on Lansdowne. But, you know, the rest of the services that the residents of these towers will be using will be paid by, you know, the rest of the citizens, the rest of the taxpayers of Ottawa.
My final question to you, same question to everyone else. If you were to summarize your thoughts on the Lansdowne proposal in one sentence or even one phrase, what would that be?
This is not a priority. This is not what City Council should be spending the taxpayers' money on. We have urgent priorities, we have minor priorities, and this isn't it.
Great. Thank you very much for your delegation.
You're welcome.
Hello, my name is Anne-Marie Hogue, as he said. I'm a member of Reimagine Ottawa and an ardent supporter of my councillor, Sean Menard, and his views on Lansdowne 2.0. My main concern has been from the start when I decided to get involved in this is in saving green space. When I think of Lansdowne Park, I'm struck by the word park. and I think a beauty of place. This park is on a site which was set aside for public purpose, and as such, as the mayor said, belongs to the people of Ottawa. They should have a say. And speak up, they did. Members of the community associations in the vicinity, Glebe Community Centre Association, Old Ottawa East, and Old Ottawa South Community Associations, have expressed grave concern and outright opposition to Lansdowne 2.0 as planned. These associations work on very thin budgets. Another organization, many other organizations got involved, like there's a Federation of Community Centers, Reimagine Ottawa, put a lot of time in this. Meanwhile, OSEG can whip up 2 videos to invite their red black fans to weigh in on the appropriateness of the project. I'm saying that as just as an example, but of course we know that these big corporations have a lot of money and they have a lot of weight because they can push a lot of weight with money. I would like to remind the mayor, city staff, and councillors that this represents a significant number of Ottawa citizens who fought long and hard to make their voice heard and to oppose building of a new arena at great cost and loss of green space. I might add that as far as consultation was concerned, consultations came after everything is pretty well in place, and it's like telling us, would you just like to just, do a little bit here and do a little bit there and just fix it, but never, it should come at the beginning before everything is in cement, so to speak. I invite people to go and walk on the site to see what will be lost with the project to build a new arena and event center. As Carolyn McKenzie said in her article in the Glebe Report, Burma's Toboggan Hill, gone. Burma's football and concert seating, gone. And I add a good part of the Great Lawn for a stroll in the park by ordinary citizens and the elderly residents in the nearby senior residences. Just, tucked away. A place to play Frisbee, a green space in this part of the city where there are no large parks that cools the air in this well-inhabited part of the city at a time when for 2 years, and now it's happening today, we have experienced record high temperatures in the city. So those spaces, those green spaces, gravely reduced. Grass, which as opposed to paved over land, absorbs the water and returns it to the sky as clouds, which then come back as welcome rain, drastically reduced. We can't afford to lose this green space in this time of climate emergency. Keep in mind also, as Sharon was saying, that this space will not be accessible for many years as the buildings are being put up. I think somebody said 7 years, and it may be more. I think the city should take the idea of urban park and space for public purpose more seriously. This is not a place to build 2 high-rise towers. Who in Sandy Hill would give over 1 inch of Strathcona Park to commercial space and high-rises? Imagine New York City without Grand Central Park, Montreal without Mount Royal Park. This is our choice to make, to save as much green space as we can in this prime location in a densely populated part of the city, adjacent to the Rideau Canal, and as said the gentleman earlier on, a UNESCO heritage site, an area which is highly prized as a tourist area. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you for your delegation. You mentioned that this park belongs to the people of Ottawa.
Yes.
In fact, I know there's a number of people in the room that understand the history of Lansdowne. And my understanding that Lansdowne Park was gifted to the city of Ottawa, to the people of Ottawa, maybe 100 some years ago.
Yes.
As a trust. Is your, if the people that gifted this land to the people of Ottawa, if they were around today, what do you think they would think about Lansdowne 2.0 and this proposal?
I don't think they'd be very happy. We know that the park became a fairground and with sports facilities. So it's not as though we want to say that can't be there, but to pave it over and there were other options. That is the idea. I remember when Lansdowne 1.0 came along, there were plans to make this an area where you could even bring water from the Rideau Canal and make it a really green space. So there were other options.
Okay. You raised the issue of consultation, and you mentioned briefly about how you thought it could be done better, but could you expand upon that point? How do you, tell us about, maybe did you have an experience engaging with Lansdowne or trying to engage with Lansdowne? Was it what you were hoping for in terms of consultation? What could have been better?
Well, that's quite difficult because when we came in, it was pretty well a done deal.
Yeah.
And by the time you learn the ropes, you have to figure out that there's the city administration. Councillors are not the only ones who count. The city administration is, I guess, has been given the go-ahead, and then they start their plans, and it's very hard to stop something like that when, all the plans are made, and you sort of, as a citizen, you feel a little bit like, well, there's not that much I can do. And then you learn by going to meetings and getting involved that there are little entry points where you can get in. And what I try to do is show up and put my 5 cents in. That's what I'm doing today.
Well, and thank you for being here. And can I end with my final question, as I have for others? If you were to summarize your thoughts on the Lansdowne 2.0 proposal in one sentence or even a phrase, what would that be?
The city should rethink what a park means. They should be respectful of the fact that this has a name, and the name is Lansdowne Park. And keep as much of the grassy places as you can, because it's important to have a space which is life-giving to the city, and which is also can be a place of beauty. We need beauty in cities. Who doesn't want to go and visit a beautiful city? So let's make it beautiful.
Great. Thank you for your delegation.
My name is Angelina Trace, and I'm pleased to be here, and I thank Neil for making this happen, and I was really impressed with all of the information and all the research and all the analysis that has been done. What I've been hearing time and again is Lansdowne Park 2 is not a financially acceptable way of earning money for the city. In fact, it's a great loss for the city, and I think we have to call it what it is. It's just a sinking ship. That's the first thing. The second thing that I want to say is my family came to the Glebe in 1958. And so I've lived there for a long time, and I've seen the transitions. Lansdowne, I used to park cars, and we used to pay our taxes parking cars when the exhibition was on. So I've seen how the Glebe has changed, I've seen how people have changed, and I've also seen how Lansdowne has changed. One of my main concerns with Lansdowne is the activities that OSAG is doing. So all of these activities seem to be top-down activities. When you have top-down activities, you don't allow for grassroots organizations and grassroots activities to actually take place. And the way it's developed right now, the way it's set up right now, there's no organic activities that would happen on a day-to-day basis that would keep people going on a day-to-day basis. when OSAG does not have an activity, Lansdowne is empty. We would like to have a Lansdowne in which day-to-day activities, organic activities, spring up on a regular basis, where are things that people can do on a regular basis. That, I believe, has been taken from us. So that's one of the things that I wanted to say. The other thing, I really appreciated Richard Moon's presentation about sports facilities. My background is in theater, and when the Roman Empire was declining, the first thing they did is they had all sorts of sports facilities to distract the people. So I'm wondering what we're being distracted from. So one of the questions that I have, and I asked this to the councillors, and this is something that is bothering me because it seems to be a process that is going on at every level of government, where we live in a democratic society, but it just seems that our voices are being silenced. All of the recourses that we used to have to actually question our people or question our supposed representatives have been snuffed out. I remember before, when the City of Ottawa was just the City of Ottawa, you could go to City Hall, they would have town hall meetings, and you can actually express your opinions. Those are no longer taking place, which is really, really sad. One of the things, again, Lansdowne 1, one of the things that people seem to forget is when Jim Watson first ran for mayor, he ran on the platform of developing Lansdowne Park. He lost. At that point in time, the City of Ottawa was not amalgamated. Once the City of Ottawa was amalgamated, he ran for mayor again, got in. First item on the agenda was Lansdowne Park. So I believe if the City of Ottawa had never been amalgamated, we would never have had Lansdowne 1 nor Lansdowne 2. So my question to the councillors is, you know, most people do not want this Lansdowne Park. You know this is a losing proposition. My question is, if we don't want it, why are you going to bring it forward? That's it.
Thank you. Angelina, thank you very much for your delegation. Can we just begin with, you mentioned that your family has been in the glebe since 1958, has seen a lot of transition, and it sounds like, and don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like has welcomed that change, has been open to it, has recognized that neighborhoods will change over time. Obviously, Lansdowne 1 and then Lansdowne 2 represents change to the glebe and other surrounding neighborhoods. Is it fair to say that local neighborhoods are that have expressed concern about Lansdowne? It's not that it's change; it's the nature of the change, and that this is not the appropriate type of change. Is that a fair statement?
I would say living in the glebe, I find it's become an investment. A lot of people come in and they see it as an investment. We don't have, I mean, we have some families coming in, but a lot of people are buying properties as an investment and not moving in themselves.
Okay. Can I ask you the comment about Lansdowne being a top-down site? And I think that it is a fair assessment that the business model is to say, let's focus on large events, whether those are games or whatever, mass events that attract a lot of people. You've mentioned that this prevents that we don't really have a mechanism for allowing organic events to happen. Do you have a sense of, can you give us some examples of what some of these sort of more organic events might look like if people were empowered to do that?
Well, we used to have, I remember going down and they would have orchestras. So the band shell would be there, and on Sundays we would go with families and listen to the band. As I was growing up at the Civic Center, I'm of an Italian background, and we would have all sorts of dances there and so on. So there was lots of different activities that were going on that came from the community.
Yeah. And just people don't have the ability to put those forward now.
Well, and the other thing that I feel is the actual stores that they've got are these big box stores. You don't have a lot of little stores. I mean, we have some, but we could have a lot more of the little stores, a lot more. I would have seen it as kind of Lansdowne Village, where people can actually feel like they can go, and there's all sorts of unique little things that really reflect the people of Ottawa. But, you know, we have chains that have come in. And even those chains aren't working because, you know, you had Radio Shack leaving, you had the chocolate place,
Lindt.
famous Lindt left. You've got all sorts of businesses that have gone bankrupt.
Okay. Can I ask my final question, which is, if you were to summarize your thoughts on the Lansdowne proposal briefly in one sentence or even a phrase, what would that be?
That Lansdowne is being hijacked by developers.
Okay. Thank you for your delegation today.
Hello, I'm Pamela Schreiner, and I was involved with Lansdowne 1.0, basically objecting to it. And one of the things that I learned is that that Lansdowne was given to the city by farmers with the proviso that it remain public land. So the city has no right to be selling any of the land, and I understood at the time that the reason that the condos on Homewood, they were basically given a 99-year lease because the city could not sell the land. So I don't think that's changed, that the city has no right to sell the land. And the second point that I want to make is that public-private partnerships don't work. The profit goes to the private and the risk goes to the public, and we see this all around the world. So that's it.
Great. Thank you for your delegation. Two great points there. Can I ask you, let's start with the public-private partnerships. You say they don't work. Do you have a sense of like why that is? What?
Well, it's a good question because it's being used all around the world,
Yeah. Well, maybe in the Ottawa context, what has not worked here? And you talked about risk, and you talked about profits.
The risk ends up being held by the city, and the profit goes to the developer. Makes sure that they get enough profit out of it. I'm not inside. I really don't know the inner workings of how that is going here.
But our understanding of Lansdowne 2.0 sounds consistent with that, right? That if there's cost overruns in the construction, who's responsible?
Yeah, exactly.
The city, the public, the taxpayer, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Can I ask on the first point about the city not having the right to sell lands at Lansdowne? That was part of the original agreement. I want to just ask a question I asked earlier, which was, are you aware of the structure on Aberdeen? Is it Aberdeen? No, sorry, Exhibition Way, which is the main road that leads straight to Aberdeen Pavilion, where the towers would be, and they would sit on a podium. And originally, we referred to that as air rights. We originally referred to that as we would sell air rights for a developer to build above this podium. In the second round, that concept of air rights was changed to property rights, meaning that we would sell the entire parcel, including the podium, and the developer said, well, we need to have certainty over the podium if we're building above it, with the expectation that we could buy it back at a later date. Does that concern you?
That's huge concern, yes, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Of course.
Can I ask my final question, which is around, if you were to summarize your concerns with Lansdowne or your thoughts on the Lansdowne proposal in one sentence or even one phrase, what would that sound like?
Public-private partnerships never work.
Great. Well said. Thank you very much. Thanks for your delegation.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. My name is Susan Mendelson, and I'm here representing the Old Ottawa South Community Association. We have some serious reservations about the Lansdowne 2.0 proposal. We know that many others share those reservations, and we believe that a referendum on the issue is necessary. Like others, we've tried to pay attention to the details, and our conclusion is that Lansdowne 2.0 is fiscally irresponsible and in violation of good urban design and of the city's own planning principles. On current estimates, the city would be contributing close to $500 million in the very questionable, we feel, hope of recouping that money sometime down the road in about 15 to 20 years. Cost overruns, which are typical of almost all major construction projects, will likely draw even more city funds as the project unfolds. And this is in the face of an acknowledged $10 billion citywide infrastructure deficit. So what would this huge outlay of funds buy us? An arena that will have slightly more than half the capacity of the current one, reduced size of the north side stands with no roof to protect people who are attending events, demolition of a recently constructed retail space, reduction in green space, and 7 to 10 years of construction that will cause major disruption to local communities, businesses, and the people who currently use the Lansdowne site. We'd like to understand what consideration has been given to other emerging sports and entertainment projects. The expected development at LeBreton Flats has received almost no mention in the deliberations on Lansdowne, but as a transit-accessible, full-sized arena and entertainment district, it will surely be a strong competitor to Lansdowne. So if we proceed with Lansdowne 2.0, we risk financing what could become a white elephant using funds that we don't even have. In addition, we feel this proposal reflects poor urban planning. One of the key challenges is the site is not on a main transit route, as the city's own planning guidelines suggest it ought to be. Rather, it's on a narrow, already congested corridor that will only get worse. Is this a destination that would be desirable and accessible to people across our city? Lansdowne 1.0 seems like that is not the case given its poor retail financial performance over the past decade. We're also very concerned about the lack of transparency and true citizen engagement from the city. From the beginning, the details on Lansdowne 2.0 have been conveyed using obscure terms. We've heard of revenue waterfalls and property tax uplift. They may sound positive, but we question whether Ottawa citizens actually understand that this means private developers get reimbursed before the city, and that property taxes from city coffers will be diverted to cover site-specific debt. In effect, residents from all over the city will be paying for services needed to put up new residential towers and getting nothing back from the property taxes on those towers. We question whether city councillors truly have a mandate to make such a major and risky funding decision on behalf of the residents that they are supposed to be representing. Almost none of them campaigned on this issue when they were elected in 2022, and we believe that they owe their constituents a say when gifting what is the equivalent of $20 million per ward in Ottawa over to Lansdowne 2.0. Wouldn't a responsible councillor want to know whether their constituents wish to allocate $20 million of their ward's tax dollars to Lansdowne instead of to better sidewalks, roads, parks, and other improvements in their own neighborhoods or citywide? Municipal referendums are not a radical concept. From 1990 to 2023, voters in North America cast ballots on 57 proposals for stadiums and arenas. 35 of those were approved, 22 were rejected. In Canada, this type of vote has been held in Montreal, in Saskatoon, in Abbotsford, and in Ontario, we certainly contemplate such exercises, at least in principle, as we have legislation called Direct Democracy Through Municipal Referendums Act that was passed in 2000. So Mayor Sutcliffe and city councilors, we have a very simple request. If Lansdowne 2.0 is truly a good plan and a wise investment, put the case in straightforward, understandable terms to your own residents and allow them to tell you what they think. Thank you.
Susan, thank you very much for your delegation. You made the point that about whether councillors have a mandate on this. I think that's a very fair question. Are you aware, and are you aware of any, can you remember any councillor or mayoral candidate talking about Lansdowne during the election?
I personally do not recall that being a topic of conversation at all.
Okay. And I think it's worth digging down on this point that you made that referenda is not a radical concept. You mentioned a number of Canadian cities that have done it. You mentioned across North America, how many have done it. Do you have a sense of why the city of Ottawa appears to be so reluctant to have this?
I can only assume that it's because they fear a negative outcome. They seem very invested in putting this forward despite receiving a lot of negative feedback from their constituents. And I can only imagine they don't want to hear the answer that would come out of a referendum.
Okay. And can you just expand a little bit? You mentioned LeBreton Flats, that we're hearing about the senators getting closer to a deal with the NCC for a stadium at LeBreton Flats. You mentioned the term white elephant. Can you just explain a little bit more about what could happen at Lansdowne if LeBreton Flats were to go ahead?
If LeBreton Flats goes ahead and it's giving competition, say, to Lansdowne, sports teams in both, entertainment, residential, the same kind of concept, not super far one from the other. If that draws people away from Lansdowne, then we will end up with a site in which our city and our taxpayers invested a huge sum of money to end up with an unused place. I don't want Lansdowne to revert to what it was in the days when it was an empty shell and a parking lot. I'd like to see life and activity and positive things going on there, but I do worry that the city isn't thinking across these different projects. They're looking at one thing at a time and not considering the impact of one on the other.
Right, okay. Let me end with my final question, which is if you were to summarize your thoughts about the Lansdowne proposal in one sentence or even one phrase, what would that be?
I would say that for the people of Ottawa, it's a high-risk proposal with low reward.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Noah Lomer. I'm a member of Reimagine Ottawa, a resident of Civic Hospital, and I'm here with one key message. I forecast that Lansdowne 2.0 will fail. It will fail because it's uneconomic. When it fails, the city will suffer very significant financial losses. Those losses must be covered by the developers who withdraw from the project. We're facing an economy which is moving into recession. We're looking at higher interest rates, slower growth, lower revenues for the city, more demands on city finance. But we're seeing this trend nationally, provincially, and municipally, and we're just beginning to enter that recession. The developers are seeing real estate sales fall off the roof. In Toronto, condominium development sales are down 60% over last year. The developers are facing the risk. They know that their sales are quite potentially going to be uneconomic. It will not pay for their development costs. They will want to back out. When they back out, Ottawa is going to be left holding the bag. We will have spent a great deal of money and be forced to spend a lot more money on a project which is not going to generate revenue as planned. We have to ask our city to prepare an estimate. What will the cost be if when Lansdowne 2.0 fails, and how will those losses be reimbursed by the developers? That's my key message. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Great. Thanks, Nolan. And I just want to drill down on that. I think it's a very important point that the macroeconomic conditions right now are not favorable. There's a high risk of recession coming up. And you mentioned the current state of the condominium market, which is depressed. And if I go back to one of the earlier speakers, I think it might have been you, Sharon, that we have this debt burden every year of 16 million, and which we're told is only going to cost us 5. But if there's no revenue off those towers, if there's no towers, because it's not economical, no revenue off it, I mean, do we think that 5 million cost to the taxpayer is realistic, or are we likely closer to that 16 million?
The whole calculation has to be redone. The whole project is going to be changed. And the cost of what has been committed and the cost for example, of tearing down existing buildings on which the city still owes, I think it's $145 million in debt. A lot of work has to be done on what it's going to cost and how we will manage and what the city will be liable for, and what the city should be reimbursed by the developers for.
Okay. Now, so you mentioned that developers are responsible for covering losses, and that was a principle of Lansdowne 1.0, and it continues. However, what's different between the original Lansdowne and this new proposal is around capital cost escalations. And our previous speaker mentioned this, that there is it's quite common for large projects to go over budget. And so who's on the hook for that? I mean, I think I asked that almost rhetorically, but is that risk about capital cost escalation being properly considered here?
I think it's never been considered, and we can expect one key thing about major infrastructure projects, that they will come in higher cost and well past the completion date. So they'll become in lower, slower, and more expensive. So and especially now, that's one of the reasons that the housing market in Toronto is so poor, because costs are much greater than they were. They're uneconomic. It's uneconomic.
Can I just ask you my final question, which is, if you were to summarize your thoughts about the Lansdowne proposal in a sentence, or even shorter, what would it be?
Lansdowne 2.0 will fail because it's uneconomic, and as a result of the failure, the city will be on the hook for major costs, which it should be compensated for by the developers.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your
Mr. Mayor, members of council, and fellow citizens of Ottawa. My name is Pamela Jones. I now live centrally, and I've been a resident of the city for over 40 years. In recent weeks, I have become increasingly alarmed by decision-making at City Hall. Planning Committee and City Council are willing to endorse the construction of a battery storage facility in a Western Ward against the urgings of both the councillor and residents. Do residents' comments mean nothing to you? I care about what happens in our rural wards and would like to think that they care about what's going on in the urban areas. After all, we're all part of the City of Ottawa. A few months ago, a staff recommendation to buy a parcel of land for $2 million raised much debate, but happily it was accepted. I must ask the rural councillors, were you really so willing to express concern about spending $2 million for rural land, but are you apparently so unconcerned about almost $500,000 for Lansdowne 2.0? Finally, I was astounded to hear that the mayor has said that the public has had plenty of opportunity to comment on the proposals for Lansdowne 2.0 and that there's no need for a referendum on whether to proceed. My immediate reaction has been that while we may have had opportunity to comment, no one seems to be listening, hearing, and changing the plan to address the comments or opposition to the plan to spend taxpayer dollars on what is increasingly a non-priority item. Mayor Sutcliffe, I kept the flyer that you sent out when you were running for the position and would offer that your words and actions now fly in the face of your commitments then, notably on affordability. I won't recklessly borrow and spend your money. You also made a point of commenting on respect, but it would seem that you were demonstrating more respect for the Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group than you are for citizens of the glebe and, more broadly, the City of Ottawa. Yes, we have indeed had opportunities to comment. I have attended numerous presentations that have resulted in the As We Heard It reports, where for the most part, participants express serious concerns or downright opposition. But it seems you have not accorded us the respect and courtesy of listening, hearing, and responding in a meaningful way. I have also written emails to the Mayor and Council. In July 2023, please consider the future of Lansdowne Park with a whole of Ottawa lens, and then consider whether OSEG has a valued role to play. October 2023, please do not accept the current Lansdowne 2.1 proposal. November 2023, please consider where you wish to use scarce resources. Do you really wish to spend years and up to $500,000 tearing down and rebuilding Lansdowne? Or perhaps use those skilled construction workers to build new affordable housing, repair and rebuild community centers, and do other things that directly serve Ottawa's citizenry. And finally, in February 2025, please reconsider spending on Lansdowne 2.0. You continue to pursue the initiative when it is clear that the city has other priorities that should require our attention and tax dollars. Construction would create tons of waste for our landfill, disruption with noise and dirt, and it will result in less green space in our already lean on green central area of the city. I realize that there are significant sunk costs, but with some courage, I believe we could stop the spending that is planned to continue for years, dismiss OSEG, and focus on areas such as Le Breton, with hopefully affordable housing and supports for those who need it, and with a grocery store or two for good measure. So much is not right. Transportation already has issues. We should not be a throwaway society. The Civic Center still has 40 years' life in it. We do not need to sell air rights if we do not buy into the messaging that OSEG needs to build condos to make money. OSEG is a private company that failed with Lansdowne 1.0 and seems to offer greater opportunity for failure. Why are the mayor, council, and planners apparently under their spell? Let's pay the penalty if needed and take back responsibility for Lansdowne before it is completely ruined. In conclusion, please start listening to us, hearing and responding. Lansdowne 2.0 is not good for city finances, the neighborhood, retail, and the environment. If you will not cancel the project outright, then please agree to a referendum amongst all city voters as to whether spending on Lansdowne 2.0 is a priority or whether other projects should take precedence. Thank you for your attention.
Pamela, thanks for your delegation. Can I just begin by asking, you brought a flyer from that Mark Sutcliffe had during the election,
Yep.
which I presume is a bit of a like a promise or platform.
His priorities: respect, safety, reliability, affordability, and economic growth.
Can I ask if Lansdowne is one of those priorities? Does Lansdowne appear on there?
Yeah, you know. Any other questions on that?
Well, no, it's simply that Mayor Sutcliffe had said that we don't need a referendum because Lansdowne was an election issue. To your understanding, was it an election issue?
Nope, but then some would argue I have a short memory. That's why I write things down.
Okay. Can I ask, you talked about consultation, and did you feel that, you mentioned there were opportunities to comment. Do you feel that there were enough opportunities? Do you feel that and now you talked about the as we heard it, but do you feel that those engagement opportunities actually gave people a real opportunity to voice their concerns?
I would say that, and so many people came out of those sessions saying they weren't really consultations. They were just information sessions. They didn't want to hear what we said. There was no real engagement. The city was going through the steps, telling us all kinds of good stuff, writing it down, and then apparently not changing their minds on things that many, many people who showed up, stood up and said, I don't believe in this. What about that? What about that? Nothing seemed to be answered.
Okay. Can I ask my final question, which I will not use on social media?
Thank you.
But if you were to summarize your thoughts on the Lansdowne 2.0 proposal in a sentence or a phrase, what would that be?
Please listen to the people and spend our taxpayer dollars on something that we really need.
Great. Thank you very much for your delegation.
Thank you.
It began before the proposal for Lansdowne 1, when Jim Watson wanted to build a convention center at the Lansdowne Park. And we wanted to save the Lady Aberdeen Pavilion. I will never call it the Cattle Castle. It is the Lady Aberdeen Pavilion. So our then councillor, Nancy Smith, with her guidance, we rented scaffolding, we bought paint, and we painted one end of the building to show how beautiful it could be. I know the exact timeline on this because my daughter was 2 years old and she's now 40, so it was 38 years ago. We painted one end of the building to show its potential and convinced them that they should save that beautiful heritage building, one of the only 2 tin palaces in North America, and that we should save it. And so we worked hard to do that. When Lansdowne 1 came along, I was chair of the Glebe Community Association, and I was invited to participate in what they called a charrette, but it was a charade. It was a complete charade. I was seated at a table with 8 developers, and not a single one of my comments was recorded. It was developer-driven. All they wanted was the names of a few people on it so they could say, oh, well, we consulted. Well, no, they didn't. They did not consult on Lansdowne 1. With Lansdowne 1, as many of you know, we worked hard to raise money to fight it in court. And we had the Lansdowne Follies at the Mayfair Theatre. And you can see some of the Lansdowne Follies still online. And if you Google Lansdowne Follies, The Tonettes, you will see me making a fool of myself because I wrote a song. To the tune of, wait, no, let me think.
Stop in the name of love.
Stop in the name of love. So stop in the name of love before you take our park. Stop in the name of love before you make our park just another mall. And then there was a voice about Larry O'Brien and another verse about Jim Watson and the closing. Anyway, 4 of my friends who don't live in the area, so they didn't know anyone in the audience, had the balls to get up with me, and we sang in front of an audience. I knew most people in the audience, but my friends didn't. Anyway, stop in the name of love before you take our park has been my theme ever since. Now, the current development, a lot of great points have been made here today, and I want to thank Neil and everyone else who organized this for actually giving us a voice. Because when you go to City Hall, the public delegations don't even get to bring in a glass of water. But Mr. Greenberg and his associates get to bring in sandwiches and coffee and whatever they want, and they're back and forth with the staff talking to them at the table. We get our 2 minutes. Anyway, it's a huge mistake, and one of my very biggest concerns is the disruption to the community. The noise, the dirt, just the disruption. And immediately across the street from Lansdowne Park is the Glebe Center, which is a seniors long-term care facility, and the Bronson Center, A lot of those people have experienced war in their lifetime. And when they hear the noise of construction and feel the vibration of the drills and so on, it affects them gravely. They worry. I've spoken to the director at the Glebe Center, and I've attempted to get in touch with the other senior centers along Bank Street to just talk to them about the disruption it's going to cause. Because the last time, when they were doing Lansdowne 1, the disruption was incredible. People couldn't get to the centers. You couldn't get an ambulance to the center because they were tearing up the street. They were tearing up the street not just to put in the extra infrastructure, but they were tearing up the street because it wouldn't bear the weight of the construction vehicles. Now, the construction vehicles this time are going to be hauling away an entire stadium at a time when the city is saying, our landfills are full. Are we going to start to incinerate? Well, you can't incinerate cement. Anyway, we've got a tremendous amount of waste that's going to be generated for no real good reason. The only reason they want to tear down the stadium is not the age of the stadium, is that it will not support two 40-story towers. They need a new base. And, as others have pointed out, they want more garages. You have a water table at Lansdowne Park, which was the first time when they dug in for their garages, they had huge spurts of water coming out of it. It's below the water table. It's a ridiculous waste of money. That stadium, I was in it for a basketball game because my choir was awarded a prize for recognition for $32,000 that we had given to the food bank at Christmas time after our concert this year. And every year we give money to the food bank. So we were being recognized with a community award. And so I was in the stadium, and I did not see a stadium that was derelict at all. The washrooms were adequate, the hallways were clean, I wasn't sitting under any dripping water, and I think that the stadium could be renovated. The excuse for tearing down the stadium is to build a base for two 40-story towers. Two 40-story towers that are going to cast in shadow all of those patio restaurants, cast in shadow the farmers market, and to me, it's a total waste of public resources. I thank all of the other delegates who've raised a lot of good points. When the first report came out from the auditors, I went through the entire thing, and there were a lot of footnotes that said, you know, this has not been proven, or we're not sure of this. So I think that the numbers, for sure, and Neil is an expert on numbers, the numbers are doubtful. Lansdowne 1 so-called waterfall didn't have a dribble of revenue to the city or to us as taxpayers, and this is a big waste. I think that if they spent the money on renovating the stadium and looked at some of the interesting plans that a couple of local architects have actually suggested about low-rise development in Lansdowne, along the lines of what Paris has done, Barcelona has done, no ugly high-rises. And I personally will be approaching UNESCO in Paris because it is the canal is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. I happen to know who has the desk for UNESCO at Global Affairs, and I will also be contacting people directly in Paris. I think that this is a terrible, terrible idea for the city. Yeah. If we wanted to do something interesting, you know, we could build more gardens at Lansdowne, but for God's sake, not two 40-story towers, because even the towers that they've currently put along Bank Street have started to set a precedent. And instead of Bank Street being a sunlit street to walk down now, you're often in shadow when you walk down it. And that's not pleasant. That's not pleasant for an outdoor cafe. That's not pleasant for people going shopping. And to make Lansdowne just another big box mall is ridiculous.
Yeah. Diane, thank you very much for your delegation.
Do you want my summary line?
Well, I'll get there. I want to ask you a question first. I want to say thank you for raising two really important issues that we haven't actually had the chance to talk about yet today. That is that it is a fair assessment to say that we are tearing down this stadium,
which could be
simply
fixed.
to build the foundation for high-rise towers.
Exactly.
And secondly, the point that anyone that goes to the, particularly the underground arena, it actually looks half decent for something that's, that's long in the tooth, and it's certainly good enough for what it needs to do. So
it's perfectly adequate. I was very comfortable watching a basketball game there.
Yeah.
And I didn't see any problems. And there were, the washrooms were adequate, and which, was one of their complaints at one time. So anyway, I think it's a total waste of money. To the councillors and to the mayor, I hope that you will listen very carefully to this delegation of all the people who've spoken today, and also to the local councillor, Sean Menard, who has been on top of it and who's been on side. He has listened. He has truly represented his electorate. And if you don't live in the area, you need to at least visit the area before you vote and waste all this money, $500 million, that could go to community centers, could go to pools, could go to more public washrooms, could improve the transit. My God, on Bank Street in the winter, you can stand at a bus stop with no shelter for 45 minutes waiting for a bus that's supposed to come every 10 minutes. We need to spend money in the right places. We don't need to waste it supporting Roger Greenberg and OSIG. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diane. Thanks for your delegation.
Do you want my closing line?
I will. Your one-liner, please.
Now, as someone mentioned earlier, Lansdowne was given to the city as a public trust for a park. And so my closing line is from my song. Lansdowne belongs to all of us, part of Ottawa's public trust. Think it over, hear what the people say. Think it over, there is a better way. Stop in the name of love before you take our park. Stop in the name of love before you make our park just another mall. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the People's Committee. We're here today to talk about Lansdowne Park and hear your views on what your thoughts are on the Lansdowne 2.0 proposal, and also the question of whether this deserves to be put to a referendum of the people of Ottawa. We have had a previous People's Committee meeting. We had one live in person about a week ago. There was a large number of people showed up to that meeting. And our plan, just so you know, is to take those delegations along with these delegations, put them all together into one package and make that available. Make sure that the mayor and city councilors know about this. Before we begin, I'd like to say I would just like to begin by saying that we recognize that we are on the unsurrendered and unceded lands of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. The Algonquins and Anishinaabe have lived here for millennia. We are grateful for the opportunity to be here today.
So I'm going to read off this, so it might look a little like I'm reading something. I'm sure other delegates and people generally who have spoken about Lansdowne have touched on the financial aspects of this deal, but I think starting with the history of Lansdowne that precedes 2.0 is somewhat instructive in this case. A Joanne Chianello article from July 2021 pegs the cost of Lansdowne 1.0 at $135 million. To this point, OSEG has lost money every year of the waterfall arrangement by their own admission. And while the city hasn't received any money, crucially, it hasn't lost any either. This new arrangement is $419 million at a minimum, but it also comes with a massive restructuring of the waterfall agreement. This makes clear that Lansdowne 2.0 is not a city building project. Rather, Lansdowne 2.0 should be seen for what it actually is, a transfer of risk, a restructuring of the deal that makes OSEG whole and hands the bag to the city. While I'm amenable to the idea that partnership should carry equal risk, this swings the pendulum from one extreme to the other. And it begs the question, if the roles were reversed, would OSEG be willing to bail the city out? And my suspicion is a very resounding no. But more pertinently, if OSEG couldn't make this arrangement work the first time around when all the pressure was on them to make it successful, Why is the city betting that it can make it work now when the city is the one taking the financial hit? It's a heck of a gamble from a city that laments its financial position regularly to anyone who will listen. The city's own Auditor General made note that costs could already be off by as much as $75 million. In addition, a note that stuck out in particular was that the projections have the Red Blacks making the playoffs 50% of the time, and the 67s playing 4.65 playoff games per year. I'd categorize these projections as rosy, and the Auditor General noted this also. But as this project has progressed, its biggest enemy has been the unofficial city policy of penny wise, pound foolish. In the initial iteration of Lansdowne 2.0, there were to be 3 towers, with the tax uplift from these towers functionally covering the debt cost. There was supposed to be a medium-sized entertainment venue. The arena was supposed to have a green roof to replace the berm. The arena we are building will be smaller than the current civic center, making it difficult for the actual revenue generator, the Ottawa Charge, to justify staying at Lansdowne when the LeBreton Arena comes online. All of these things and more have been removed from the project, which makes sense if you're trying to save money. But that isn't what this is. This is a risk transfer. So we should be building the biggest, brashest tax revenue drawing place we can, because if we don't, and currently we aren't, when it fails, and it will, the taxpayer loses. This leaves us in the middle of 2 choices: do nothing or do the big thing. And we're currently on track to do neither. And it concerns me that a voting majority of councillors either don't understand this or don't care. I'm not particularly interested in doing OSEG any large favors. The asset here is the land, not the buildings on it. Turn it into housing for all I care. But if the city feels the need to take another crack at revitalizing Lansdowne, they should go back to the drawing board and come up with a more equitable deal, actually open the purse strings, or just cancel the deal entirely. Pennywise pound foolish is already killing the transit system. At some point, council needs to stop letting that permeate everything they do. I would say that this should absolutely be a referendum because clearly it has gotten away from council.
Jim, thank you very much for the delegation.
Not a problem.
Can I ask you, you referred to this as a bailout.
Yes.
And you also mentioned the idea of anyone who would listen, about the financial woes that the city is in, and they will tell that to anyone who will listen. If we were to go ahead with Lansdowne 2.0, what message do you think that sends to higher levels of government in terms of, our Fairness for Ottawa campaign that the mayor has had, that the city just doesn't have enough resources for what it needs?
I mean, I think it's another arrow in the quiver of people who would say back to the city, well, you talk about the financial straits that you're in, but you won't raise property taxes to cover it. You're actually doing it at a rate much lower than any other city in Canada. You have a large project like Lansdowne 2.0 that you're willing to put onto the front burner instead of taking care of a transit system that is self-admittedly having a lot of issues. And I mean, I think we can do both. I think we can do lots of things, but it's this idea that we can do things without paying for them, or that the financial decisions we make that are irresponsible have nothing to do with the issues we're having financially in other places. It's all interconnected. So it does ring kind of hollow when they say we have financial problems. Here's $500 million for a private corporation.
Okay. And you mentioned the idea that we really need to send this back to the drawing board, that we've, this penny wise, pound foolish. Part of the challenge I think people have identified is that we only ever had one option. That this was, there just weren't these diversity of options that were put forward. Any sense of what other options might look like, and would we need more engagement of the public in those exercises?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, there was a third tower that got removed, I believe at the behest of Councillor Menard, if I'm remembering correctly. And that's kind of the problem. The entire deal was structured around the tax uplift from 3 towers. It's basically, we're going to take future tax potential and use it to pay the debt, which I'm kind of okay with the idea of it, but now we've removed that, which is what is making this so financially unviable. So
right.
Like I said, if you're going to do it, really do it. Really come up with things that are going to pull in the tax revenue, you're going to pull in the dollars and actually make this deal possible. But that's not what we're doing. We're starting to cut things. We're doing that thing where we do the value engineering. Well, that's now making this no longer viable, even if it was before, which, I mean, even the first iteration of Lansdowne 2.0 probably wasn't going to work out well. Now we're in a place where it definitely will.
Okay. Jim, if you were to summarize your concerns about Lansdowne 2.0 in one sentence or one phrase, what would that be? And a warning to everyone else, I'm going to ask you all this question.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm terrible on the spot. I would say, this is a bad idea. Try again.
Great.
And do better.
Jim, thank you very much for your delegation today.
Not a problem.
Afternoon. Yes, Tom Wendell here. I'm a resident of the Glebe. I've lived in the Glebe for about 30 years. I love the Glebe, love living there. I'm not in favor of 2.0. The big two reasons I have about it is it's as far as how you handle major infrastructure projects, and secondly, the idea of Lansdowne as an iconic Ottawa landmark site. Now, when you think of how Lansdowne got started back in the 1880s as the Central Canada Exhibition site, and then the Aberdeen Pavilion, I just raised up this nice little drawing that maybe you know Tom Quinn. He lives over in First Avenue. He drew this back in the mid 80s because at that time there were plans to tear down the Aberdeen Pavilion. Anyhow, that puts me on the next course. In the 80s, we went into a major plan of how to redesign, how to redevelop Lansdowne. And as many of you, when I look at the age range, everybody on the screen here, you'll well remember that probably took about 25 years of wrestling, of haranguing to decide how best to go forward with Lansdowne. And finally, after many, many plans were put forward, and there were some beautiful plans where they're going to bring the canal in, and it's going to be very expensive. Would have been some fantastic ideas, but we came up with a plan. The city voted on it, council voted on it, and they built what we have now. And that was built and finished probably 11 years ago. Now, I just comment on that as so that's a major infrastructure development that we did, and it was built and completed 11 years ago. In the last 11 years, I, as a resident, I've enjoyed going to Lansdowne to see some of the sports activities, to enjoy the restaurants, the bars, and I'm quite happy with it. What I'm not happy about is seeing another major plan to do another big infrastructure project after only 11 years of enjoying this. And I don't know, I'm sure that everybody here has traveled to Europe. You see how they do major infrastructure projects. They're meant to last a lot longer than 11 years. It seems after a couple of council changes, then all of a sudden they want to take another kick at the can here. And the other point I just want to shortly make is this is one of Ottawa, this is the nation's, it's a landmark site. It's an iconic landmark site, or it's supposed to be. And it's supposed to be a place of green space. So we enjoy the sports, we enjoy the, everything that it offers, and it provides a lot of green space. And of course, that green space is getting thinner and thinner. And I'm sure this next development is going to take away a lot of that green space. And we just can't let that happen. So those are my 2 points. If I had to say what's it about, it's about proper infrastructure projects and maintaining it. If you made a decision, and we made that decision back 15 years ago, it was built, completed 11 years ago, we stay with it. We don't go throw another $500 million at it. Give that to LeBreton or whatever. And secondly, protect our green space. So yes, I'm in favor of a referendum for the Ottawa residents to vote on this.
Great. Tom, thank you very much for your delegation. You've answered my question about your short description. So can I just ask you one or two other questions? And that's, you mentioned the idea of this has been 11 years since we rebuilt this the first time. Does that indicate to you that there is failing infrastructure, or is it, as the previous speaker was suggesting, essentially a failing business model here?
Well, as I understood it, and I'm not up on the details, but the failing infrastructure was, yes, they had taken into account the north side. They figured that if they threw another $30 or $40 million at it, they could fix up whatever they needed to push those buildings another 30 years. As far as I don't know my details as far as the engineering on it, but I don't think there's any indication the place is going to fall down. They can throw some money at it and hold it all together for another 30 years anyhow. They should be able to, without having to spend another $500 million or whatever's on the plans now.
Right. Yeah. And just to confirm your point, Tom, I mean, the city report is that we could maintain those north stands in that Civic Center arena as they are for another 40 years easily at a very cost-effective maintenance cost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Tom, yeah. Okay, Tom, thank you very much for your delegation today.
Really joined in today to hear the rest of what everybody else had to say. And I just wanted to remind everybody, not that we all don't know, But how this got off the rails in the first place, which was when Larry O'Brien decided, sounds like on his own, to just cancel the design competition. That's really when things took a bad turn. We were heading for a public design, public consultation for what we ought to do as a citizenry, decide what to do about Lansdowne. And then it headed off the rails and then got worse as the OSEG partners are obviously got their hands on the wheel, not the city and OSEG together, it's OSEG. And the city, I'm really embarrassed that our city has allowed this partnership to really be a one-sided partnership. It is embarrassing because it shows they don't have the wherewithal, or it could be cultural. It could be the Watsons of this world and the lack of leadership at council to try to do the right thing. So I'm almost despairing of the prospect that the city would manage any of their big problems right now well. They got a bad record. I mean, if you throw in Taywin and Lansdowne and the LRT, just those three, that's enough. We don't have a good record, and I'm looking for some sign of hope that there's some way to derail again what was already derailed by O'Brien. That's it. Thank you.
Brian, thanks for your delegation. The lack of a design competition meant that we essentially sole sourced the project to this one partner that you mentioned, OSEG.
Neil, we didn't really sole source it. That was the deal. That's why they canceled the deal in the first place. These guys must have walked in, the Ruddy, Shakeman, and Mark Greenberg must have walked into O'Brien's office and said, "Hey, we got a better idea. Forget the design competition. Let's do this." And then that's it. That's the way they went. It wasn't as if they ever went to some kind of proper purchasing contract. Just want to get you straight on that. That's the kind of thing that I think the average citizen, it just adds a little bit of important data to the average citizen who's willing to vote. But I don't mean just being in the referendum, but who bothers to come out to vote. That this is a long history of bad management from the get-go. Go ahead, Neil. Sorry.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask you about that. You referred to city culture, right? The city of Ottawa culture. Is there what do you think can be done to change that?
Yes. Well, that's going to have to be at the ballot box.
Okay.
And so between now and the October next year, some things have to shake and move. But it's almost as if I have a sense, almost as if there's a perfume, or actually a bad smell in the air here that's lingering, where we don't have enough councillors, anywhere near enough councillors to be progressive on anything, not just this decision, because it would take quite a bit of progressiveness to reverse where they're heading now on Lansdowne. So that's why I, on the one hand, despair, but I'm also hopeful somehow or other that, let's say, for example, we had a brilliant mayoral candidate who everybody pretty well respected, doesn't whether or not they've ever been mayor or councillor before, it wouldn't really matter as much, that people could get behind, people meaning, the usual 38% who turn out. It could happen. It would be slow to make the culture change, but of course, all the bureaucracy would have to be changed because that's what's part of the culture. The culture has been set by people like Watson, the passive, aggressive, hunker down, certainly don't engage the citizens properly at all. In fact, make it worse every year. So there'd have to be some freshness coming from the hope, I think, probably in some candidates more than, plus a good mayoral candidate to maybe lead the way for those who bother to come out to vote.
Okay. Brian, would you like to take a stab at that question I just posed about what would be, if you were to describe Lansdowne in one sentence, your concerns about Lansdowne in one sentence, what would that be?
Well, it goes back to when, because I was involved very closely in the beginning in the 1.0 resistance. It gets down to the expression that was so useful then, still is, even though we weren't successful. Let's get it right.
Yeah, very well said. Brian, thank you very much for your delegation today.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I didn't really have any intention on sharing any opinions. I was I really just wanted to listen. I've been paying attention to this whole Lansdowne 2.0 for quite some time, for many years. Just a couple of quick points, just from what I've heard shared already, is if this project is as big as it is, and part of the rationale for not having a referendum was that, well, we haven't done it before for any major large projects. The question that comes to my mind is, why wouldn't you have a design competition if it means that much to the city? If it can be compared to LRT and other other larger projects, why wouldn't you give it the time and the effort necessary in order to consult, to have more involved consultation and stuff like that? So a design competition makes sense if you're going to use that kind of rationale. Funny enough, though, I think that the Glebe Association, I've listened to many other discussions, and I've seen some absolutely wonderful ideas being put forward by the Glebe Association. So it's not like, to tell you the truth, have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, there's all kinds of good ideas, thoughtful, effective, creative, inspiring ideas that are already been submitted. But it seems that council, many of the members of council simply, they hear you, but they don't listen to you. So you have a lineup of delegates, delegations, or whatever, who speak their mind passionately about a subject, and then it's okay, next, up next, up next. Maybe ask the questions that are usually asked are by people like councillors like Sean Menard, or people who are already invested in ensuring that Lansdowne 2.0 gets reimagined, or at least, hey, listen, we need to put the brakes on this and really pay attention to what is actually possible. So, and then just another a question to some of you who are far more involved than I am in all this. How many actual city councillors at the moment do you think are open enough to change their mind? The ones who have already supported Lansdowne 1 and 2, or like the Alan Hubleys of the world, how many out there are willing, do you think, that could be persuaded, or at least to say, hey, listen, I want to reconsider my support. I know the new councillor in Osgood, from what I heard, was open to maybe not supporting Lansdowne 2.0. But anyway, those are just a couple of quick comments. I could go on and on forever. So,
Michelle, I'll jump in and answer your question as to how many councillors might be amenable. As a council, we all know council of 25. We know that during the first Lansdowne vote, 9 councillors opposed the deal and another 16 supported it. So the question becomes, of those 16, how many might be amenable to changing their vote? I mean, I guess the point is that when you think about the math, if we take that new Osgood councillor at face value, where she had said before the election that she was opposed to Lansdowne, so that should make it 10 to 15. It's really a question of, are there 3 or 4 councillors that would switch their vote, and in which case would this get defeated in October when it comes to a final vote? And I think it really comes down to, I believe that there's a number of councillors that feel that no one's paying attention, or certainly their constituents aren't paying attention, or that maybe this is a Glebe and other neighboring communities only issue, and therefore, I could, as a councillor from another ward, I can vote against, I can vote for this and hope that no one pays attention. So I think part of the challenge is for advocates like myself and anyone else that doesn't feel that Lansdowne is the appropriate way to be spending this amount of money. It's really to find a way to make those councillors be accountable for their decision. And I do believe quite strongly that if their constituents were properly informed that this is a citywide issue, not just a local issue, and furthermore that this is how their councillor is planning to vote, I think that many more people would be much more engaged on this. That's my short answer to that. But can I just ask you a question? And that's, you mentioned some of the wonderful ideas for alternative uses of the site that you'd heard from the Glebe Community Association. And one of the ideas that I had heard is turning it into more of a community hub, because right now Lansdowne, it's used on big events, maybe, I don't know, let's call it 100 times a year, and then the other 265 days of the year it's basically not used to any great extent. Do you think that's one of the ideas that you would like to see going forward?
Definitely, most definitely. I mean, personally, I mean, not that it would ever happen, but I would, as a season ticket subscription holder to the Ottawa Red Blacks, I'd like to see them move to Le Breton Flats. I'd like to see, better, more easy transport to the venue. I'd like to see Lansdowne become much more of a community hub, and where it's easy enough. You don't have those huge events that end up becoming a bottleneck on Bank Street, and it's a nightmare. It really is very poorly planned. But yeah, I'd like to see something like that.
Okay.
But this is how this project has touched me in a way. So just a quick background, I came to Ottawa around 25 years ago from Montreal. And I'm involved in sports. So I've been to Lansdowne to see Red Blacks, Blackjack, Ottawa Charge, now half season, the Rapids. Through those sport events, I finally developed a sense of attachment to the city, actually. And with the Ottawa Charge, it's the momentum has been incredible. I've never seen the city come together like this. Like, I've gone to concerts, and I'm like, there's a little something, especially me coming from Montreal. I'm like, there's a little something missing, just that people seem more independent, or because we are very diverse and we have government coming from outside, many people coming from outside. And it's the first time I see young people, older, every generation, every diversity. And when I don't know all the details, but that project 2.0 didn't speak to me. And I was afraid that we're losing um, something that can be amazing for the city and the community. I think, like you said, it is a city decision. It's not just local. It's not, we, there's so many negative right now in the world. And wow, it's been a long time. I've seen this energy and people coming together. The energy, like before the games at restaurants, I think it's been great. Before games, after the games, I've been involved, and my friends are jumping in. People who have never been, a bit like me, have never taken the time and visited Lansdowne or really be attached and involved, are coming in, and I'm talking to them, and I'm like, oh my God, it's like a diamond in the rough. There's a real potential here, and I don't want it. I think I'm a bit like the previous person. I would like the community, at least the counselor, not forgetting that it's not just a financial and not just numbers crunching and before making a decision, that it's really, it needs to be for the city, for Ottawa, for the people, for the residents, not just for, going to a Senators game. It's not affordable for everybody. So
Yeah.
for me, the Rapid, the more that level, Ottawa 67s, it reached more people, I thought. It definitely reached
Yeah.
me. So,
So
yeah.
great. Vicky, thank you very much for your delegation. And I want to ask you some questions from your perspective as a fan, and particularly for the Ottawa Charge. Now, I think we're all have been amazed to see how successful this team has been, both on and off the ice, and certainly in terms of the number of people that it is attracting to its games. You know that the current Civic Center holds, I believe it's about 9,000 people. And under the new event arena that's proposed, we will be down closer to 5,000 people. So does that, as an Ottawa Charge fan, you know, you've seen how popular those games are. Does that concern you?
Big concern. Big concern because I said, oh yeah, but standing up. I'm not going to want to stand up except when I'm cheering and turning my towel. But no, I mean, we've been one of the venues where the fans are committed and we have embraced this team. And I don't think that was a factor when they considered 2.0, or they didn't see how much that impact was and what we can do. And yes, the players also are, I don't know, I think the whole city embarked in this journey and this adventure, and we're just at the beginning. So yes, that concerns me, and I think we need to keep it. I mean, when there was the play of 8,000, but what I think on average it's 7,500 people or 400 people on average. That's incredible. And that's just year two. Imagine where we can go.
Yeah, and you know the other thing about that I want to ask you about with respect to the Charge and the sort of people that come out to a Charge game, you know, one of the elements of the Lansdowne 2.0 proposal that is not really talked about, but it is embedded in the documentation, is that ticket prices will go up for all events. You know, on two levels. First of all, it'll be they're redesigning the stadium or the arena to be smaller and more and cater to a higher end market. Number one, but number two, there'll also be a ticket surcharge to help pay for all of this. So, with higher ticket prices, and again, as an Ottawa Charge fan, does that concern you? And what do you think that would do to the crowd?
It does concern me because that's been the beauty. It's accessible financially, and I mean, I'm an average, budget, my salary. I'm full-time, but I'm not in the high bracket. I'm in the middle. And like my friend, and that's what I've been nice because I haven't been able to go to Sens or whatever. It's only companies and that's what I that go. But actually in the stands, it was people. It was my neighbors. It was people in the street, not just business, and they give their tickets or whatever. It's actually us, the community. And that we've been, and that's it. It's been affordable. It's young, it's old people, it's any kind of age, and to see the young ones, our next generation, being able to be there and embrace it. Well, it's with the high price, how can a family of four can afford it? But it adds up. Everything has been going up. That's the only thing. And it's like, okay, well, I'll include it in my budget, and because it's worth it, and it's part of my city. It's encouraging local, it's an encourage. So I'm happy to go spend my money because it's helping, it's local. I'm helping, the restaurants, the whatever. So I'm making a choice, and I'm happy to make that choice and contribute to the city.
Wonderful. Vicky, thank you so much for your delegation.
You're welcome.
Before I start my delegation, I just want to bring up something that I read today. The current Oscar, the July-August Oscar, has a historic page, page 11, I think, that refers to 1998, where Jim Watson is quoted about Lansdowne, and I just found it fascinating that 10 or 15 years later, he had the opportunity to do what he described in 1998. Take a look. So my delegation. I'm Jake Morrison, an old Ottawa South resident and a member of OPEG, the Ottawa Public Engagement Group. We've been meeting for about 6 months now, trying to figure out what to do about public engagement in Ottawa. We advocate for more meaningful public engagement and you'll be hearing more from us in the fall when we truly get going. So about Lansdowne, we contend that Lansdowne 2 was not engaged properly, and therefore is an illegitimate public project, and an illegitimate use of public funds and of public parkland. Lansdowne 2 is supposedly a public project, but you can only tell because it's public money that's going into it. Not because the public was asked what we wanted to do with the park. So instead of creating a public assembly to deliberate on what to do with Lansdowne, either for Lansdowne 1 or 2, our politicians have let city staff and OSEG plan the project without ever asking us what we thought should be done. They will say, and in fact, the mayor said last week or 2 weeks ago at that financial committee meeting that we are echoing, the mayor said that we've been consulted at every step, that the city has conducted a robust public engagement process and the people have spoken. Well, they missed the most important step, the first step. So we say that the current process is rotten at the core, and that no amount of performative public engagement can fix that. It's rotten because they didn't ask city residents what they wanted before they asked OSEG what they wanted. We think a proper process for major public projects would be consult citizen residents before a decision or concept is too far developed to be modified. Provide enough information and time for residents to participate in a meaningful way, and then consider residents' input with the same weight as that accorded to other sectors, like developers and other business interests. And by the way, those 3 items are what was asked for when the city consulted about the current public engagement strategy in 2013. Residents' requests were ignored then. How much grief has that caused? We at Ottawa Public Engagement believe that as modern projects and policies get more and more complex and technical, it is more and more important for residents to get their needs, desires, and wisdom into the mix at the beginning before the experts lock the process up. So now council is left with deciding if the city wants to pick up the bill for this supposedly public project after residents have been frozen out of the process. Sorry, I consider that an illegitimate public project. So we say no, let's start over again and finally do it right. Consult your residents first.
And Jake, would you say it's fair to say that if, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I think I heard was that they probably knew from the start what they wanted to do, that by the time they actually approached the public, it was effectively a done deal, and that the actual consultation was just performative and just essentially ticking a box.
Yeah, they set it up that way, very exactly and deliberately. The city staff created what's called the Lansdowne 2 public engagement strategy. And if you look at that, the first, the only stakeholder that they talk to at an equal level is OSEG. Everything, all engagement with the public is pretty well information oriented. They're giving information, but in some cases they say they're consulting, they're listening, they're hearing what you say. But OSEG is the only one that they really pay attention to as a partner.
Yeah. Okay.
So yes, it was done. It was done. The plans were made before we were asked. Yes.
Okay. Jake, I think probably just about everyone on this call cares deeply about this subject of public engagement. And are you aware of any engagement? Like, would you say the Lansdowne engagement process is typical for the city of Ottawa, or is it unique in any way? Like, is it different qualitatively than other engagement processes, or are there any good examples that the city has done that that we could point to?
Yeah, there's one last year. The Rural Summit was quite amazingly different. I mean, Lansdowne, I think, is the norm, um, but the Rural Summit was. I think what's unique about the Rural Summit is that it was organized by the rural councilors, and rather than go to staff to implement it, they went to their residents. And so I mean, I've lived in the rural area many times. There's strong community in most rural areas. People do things together. They organize things. They have picnics. They do whatever. And so the Rural Summit was organized by those people. Staff provided service, and to me that's quite appropriate. Um, I think that kind of community organization should be the basis of engagement, of consultation, always. It should come from the community.
Okay, Jake, thank you very much. Thanks for your delegation today.
Sure thing.
I'm here to add my voice regarding Lansdowne Part 2.0, which I like to call 2.0 or 2.0, like not the way to go. When people ask me what part of town I live in these days, I say I live in the shadow of Lansdowne. It's not literally true, but I live in the uneasy, foggy confusion around the processes of the city that are not transparent and do not seem to relate to the true concerns of the population. Starting from the local, we who live in the nearby neighborhoods, the Glebe, Ottawa South, Ottawa East, we're the ones most immediately at the site or near to the effects of it. On that level, we see the sparseness of pedestrian traffic on days during Lansdowne daytime, and versus the activity on our own small streets, shopping areas on Bank Street or Elgin Street or Main Street. I don't know, I threw Elgin in there by accident. Let's see here. For the most part, I have avoided Lansdowne since it became 1.0, finding I prefer small shops along Bank Street and Main Street to the big stores at Lansdowne. The city's promise, people will recall, was that Lansdowne would be populated by small, unique boutique businesses. That turned out not to be true. Typical example, Winners. There's now a giant beer market. I was amazed at the vast acreage in there. Good food too, and large cinemas blasting out, loud sounds when the Mayfair is right up the street, of course. Anyhow, there are positives too. You could receive a vaccination at Lansdowne, at least we did. And there was a large public clinic there. There were free musical events. There was a small art gallery. Other blessings of Lansdowne seem to be the farmers market. Everybody loves to go there, and it's always well populated. There's free access to watch football games if you're very frugal up on the hill. That would leave if Lansdowne 2 happened. There's some raised gardens. There's places kids can ride trikes and people can walk. It's got some stuff going for it as a park. The introduction of the Women's Professional Hockey League, which people have already referred to, brought a new enthusiastic crowd that probably can match the devotion of the 67s as well. I'm going to go ahead. Let's see if I can. For me, these few noticeable benefits should be preserved, while the next set of promises from the city should be examined very carefully. I have these concerns about it. One, and most overriding, the financial losses that are predictable and unnecessary burdens on all city taxpayers. The retail businesses that have been located there have not profited as predicted, I believe. The waterfall, so-called waterfall of financial benefits to the city from the income of its commercial sports partner OSEG has never appeared, even as a trickle. It's more like a drain. And one calculation I've heard is that every ward in our large and varied city would lose the equivalent of $20 million from its yearly budget to pay for Lansdowne. Why should a city pay for a sports arena which does not serve all citizens? OSEG is a commercial operation which should be self-supporting. Other cities have had the ability to say no to such partnerships and have vetoed building new arenas. Such expensive and, dare I say, fruitless partnerships we could say no to. We know that city budgets are stretched in all directions, and unnecessary burdens on all city taxpayers. And the Lansdowne makeover is one thing that has few benefits for the citizens of Ottawa. The plans seem flawed, unattractive, and willfully ignorant of the imperatives our city should be acting on. The city has announced that climate change in our city is an emergency. How did the plans for Lansdowne 2 address this concern, which should be central to every major project? How do the selling of air rights, the trashing of Lansdowne 1.0 buildings to enable the building of taller, towering condos, presumably expensive ones, how does that fulfill the hope of a livable and affordable city? I don't get it. What does the change of the arena from a capacity of 9,000 currently filled by fans to a capacity of 5,000, what will that do for women's sports? Why build a stadium for football with no roof? Have we totally forgotten winter? So many of these plans make no sense to the citizens who will end up paying for them. For what seems most likely to become another white elephant project weighing down the citizenry with massive debt and even more massive distrust of the city government. Massive distrust of their ability to govern according to the actual requirements of our times and the needs of the people. We need to change course. We need to focus on affordable housing. We need to focus on greening the city or keeping the green we have, and on fire and flood protection. We need to make certain our private partners, if any, do not define our financial prospects. We need to remove important discussions and decisions from behind closed doors. What makes a city livable? A healthy ecosystem, living wages, sustainable food production, accessible healthcare would be on my list of priorities. Our city, even though they don't have full responsibility, can have a hand in all those large issues. And what makes a park a natural resource? Beauty, trees, gardens, clean water, freedom to move, sports and relaxation, shade, birds, and music. Thank you.
And I don't have anything prepared. I just want to give you a brief overview of my experience with Lansdowne. I, like Brian, was part of that design competition way back in the 2008 or something, 2006. And I remember there was like hundreds of people that showed up. And they asked everybody, what do they think about Lansdowne? What should we do with Lansdowne? Do you know where football was? The bottom of the list. Nobody cared. And lo and behold, everybody wanted football. And so we got Lansdowne 1.0, you know, after looking at it and saying, okay, well, this thing is not really what everybody wants. What are they trying to do? What are they trying? So I read a few of the documents. I said, you know what? It's not going to work. It's actually built to fail. So my conspiracy theory brain started thinking of, okay, what's going on? These guys want to privatize public space. That's basically what it was all about. How do they privatize public space? But the deal was a waterfall thing. And I thought, oh my God, how is this going to work? I can't believe it. We're doing this. And I think no businessman in their right mind would ever get into a deal like that. So anyways, I think, but at the end of 30 years, if the thing goes okay, we get all the property. That was part of the deal. That would all go back to the city. That's normal in some of these real estate things. And then I thought, well, if it doesn't go well and they fail, we still get the building. So what are you going to do? Anyways, it was a foregone conclusion. We knew that. And then all of a sudden the pandemic comes. And all of a sudden they come back to, you know, with their hands out saying, we need more money. We're failing. It's not working. It's the pandemic's fault, blah, 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 blah. So we cancel all the things that they needed to do. That there was the right of the city to cancel a deal without any cost. We gave it up. We gave up all the revenue, extended the thing for another 10 years, for 40 years. We said, okay, this is nonsense. I took my counselor to task on that. I said, why are you doing this? He said, prevent us from further costs. And I asked him specifically about the question, well, what about the north stands? Are we going to have to rebuild the north stands? He wouldn't answer. And now we have the deal. We're going to rebuild the north stands after we spent so much money already on the south stands, which look like crap right now. And all the other money that we spend, I think somebody had said that we'd spend already up to $500 million on this thing. They want us to spend another $500 million on this thing. But for me, I say enough is enough. Want a better deal. This is all it's about. I want a better deal. If they want a stadium, they should pay for it. It's exclusively for them. It's nobody else's. Nobody else uses it. They're the only one that use it, so they should pay for it. And if we want to do anything further, we got to renegotiate the whole deal. Forget the waterfall, cancel the waterfall, make it a 50-50 split like everybody else, like every real partnership, and then go forward and see how whether they want to do that. They'll shake their head, say, no, we don't want to put our money anywhere. We just want to rake in the dough and continue. So I don't know what's going to happen with all this stuff. If they do sign this thing, is it eventually going to become private land in the hands of the Ottawa oligarchs or what? But I still don't trust them. But I think one of the keys here is that they keep saying we need a new stadium, we need a new stadium. It's functionally obsolete. Well, that's BS as far as I'm concerned. I think we all know that. We said the thing is going to stand for another 40 years. That's all we need to say. You don't need to spend this money now. We can keep the money. We can keep our $500 million. We don't have to redo this thing right now. Keep on hammering that home. And a lot of people who don't really care about the Glebe or Lansdowne or Ottawa South that, well, I don't want to spend $500 million and we don't have to. And I think that's one of the key messages we got to get out to the public.
Michelle, thank you for your delegation.
Sure.
You made a really important point about the fact when you talked about the stadium, you said it's only for them.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that for the benefit of everyone?
Well, as well, the football games. I mean, who owns the teams, right? Does anybody
Yes.
else go there for that? Does anybody else do anything there? Does anybody else have the authority to go into the stadium and the hockey rink and any other part of the civic center? No. So it's all for them. Nobody else is going to be there.
Yeah. No, and I think it's worth emphasizing that those north stands that we're talking about demolishing and rebuilding, they are essentially only used by the Red Blacks.
Mhm.
And that's what, maybe a dozen times a year. There might be the occasional special event like a World Cup soccer match that comes to Ottawa
Right.
where we need to use them. But all of the other sports franchises only use the South, put all their fans in the South stands. And
Okay.
so I think it's a very fair point that this is
Mhm.
a very limited use, and whether it's the best use of public money is
Right.
is obviously an open question. Michelle, I wanted to ask you one
Okay.
other question,
Okay.
and that was about, you said football. You talked about football at the beginning, and you said in Lansdowne 1.0 that was at the bottom of the list. Do you think you could explain a little bit more about that?
That's the as Brian had mentioned, there was a design They had decided to do a design competition, and the city sponsored. I think it was Councillor, who was the councillor for the Glebe and the councillor for I'm an Alta Vista, so it's Peter Hume. Put together a proposal, say get a bunch of people together, have open discussion like a focus group. It was done at Lansdowne. There hundreds of people showed up, and there were 2 sessions, and they each had, okay, what's important? What would you like to see here? Public space, arts, theater, music, football, sports, housing, all kinds of things. And football was at the bottom of the list. Nobody cared. And I'm talking about hundreds of people. I don't know whether it represented the whole city, but everybody that cared to show up said, no, we don't care about football. But that's the key that they used to open up Lansdowne 1.0. And I'd like to make one other point. When the city did this, they had done a study about where to put a football stadium. Lansdowne was not at the top of the list. Bayview was at the top of the list. And we own the land there. And if we wanted to spend money on a stadium and get a new deal or something, go there. Don't tear down this stadium and build something that's not going to work. We know the financials won't work. So, if you decide you want football badly enough and everybody else does, get them involved and say, okay, let's all get together and make a deal and build something at Bayview where they have some transit where it can get to, not this nonsense that we have here.
Yes. Michelle, thank you very much for your delegation today.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much, Nick, and thanks, Neil, for doing this. I didn't actually prepare any comments for this afternoon, so I'll keep it fairly brief. I guess what I did want to just make sure that I think people probably on this call probably realize this, but the whole reason we're even having this conversation is because it's a conversation, Lansdowne 2.0, that was initiated by OSEG. And it was initiated because OSEG was losing money on a deal that they proposed back in 2010 or 2011, Lansdowne 1.0, I'll call it. So because they were losing money, and that was the deal that they made, the city would invest over $200 million, and they would be responsible for running the place, but also for any financial losses because it was a deal that they made. So because they've been losing money, at a certain point, they decided that they weren't prepared to continue on that basis. And they came forward to the city and started talking about a new proposal, a new deal, as it were. And that's where we are today. But those conversations with the city about a new deal, to my understanding, would have started back probably as early as 2019, 2020. So it's taken some time to move things along. At that time, I think it was in 2021, City Council agreed to move forward to demolish the facilities and to get new facilities, a new stadium, new north side stands, but with the clear condition that it not cost taxpayers anything. And we're a long ways away from that. A long ways away from that. Notwithstanding the mayor talking about it only costing us $5 million a year. That's an average over 40 years if everything goes perfectly well. In the first 10 plus years, the city will be on the hook for servicing the debt. The waterfall, the new waterfall that from Lansdowne 2.0 will not be producing anything for some time. So it'll be taxpayers funding Lansdowne 2.0 for the foreseeable future, and possibly for most of the next 40 years, unless things go perfectly well. And I guess I think that the next point is that, of course, we're in 2025 now. We've moved through COVID, which were also tough years for Lansdowne. But when the city in 2023, the last major decision point, I'll say, for this project, they hired Ernst & Young to do a financial due diligence on the financial strategy. And in that very long and comprehensive report, they looked at the future projections, and they projected that Lansdowne would be breaking even by 2030, and then begin to be profitable after that. Not huge profits. And again, this is not, I'm talking about without Lansdowne 2.0, without any redevelopment. These are their projections that Lansdowne would break even by 2030 and then become profitable after that. And actually what's happened in the last couple of years is that Lansdowne has actually operated at essentially break even on a cash basis. So, and I mention that because to me, when I look at that, and I see Ernst & Young's projections through 2030, it's essentially break-even situation. So that to me strongly suggests that the whole rationale for moving forward with Lansdowne 2.0, the so-called solution of Lansdowne 2.0, it was to solve a problem of OSEG losing money, and OSEG is no longer losing money at Lansdowne. So why would we still move ahead with a $500 million solution to a problem that no longer exists? And in particular, when the city staff have just in the last month presented to Finance Committee and Council the fact that we have an $11 billion shortfall in funding our capital asset base across the city over the next 10 years. It's a huge, huge amount that we're going to have to figure out in the next 10 years. And council has already, as part of that $11 billion, decided that we will take on what looks like about $1.7 billion of new debt over the next 10 years. That's on top of our base of about 3.3 billion. So it's not a small amount. Anyway, that's a lot of details, but suffice it to say, taking on so much debt at Lansdowne, when we're facing huge financial pressures as a city, financial pressures that are likely to lead to some element of fee rates, property taxes, or cuts in services. And at the same time, we're still going to push ahead with funding millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of additional debt to pay for a solution at Lansdowne that is actually no longer required, even if you accept that that is a problem, that is OSEG losing money, that the city as a partner must solve on behalf of OSEG or in partnership with OSEG. So I'll just leave it there. I know that's probably a little bit more into the weeds in detail. I'm sorry I didn't hear the other discussion because I'm just joining, but I just wanted to make that clear. I don't think there should, in my view, there should not be any particular urgency to move forward with so much debt and so much risk on this project. If there ever was, there certainly is no longer.
Yeah, Carolyn, thank you very much for your delegation. Can I pick up? I'd like to pick up on a number of those points, and starting with your first point that you mentioned, this Lansdowne 2.0 was initiated by OSEG, and you're like really essentially developed. I think you said 2019, 2020, sort of in that time frame. And it's interesting. It really only first came to the public in 2022, which just as an aside goes back to Jake's comments about public engagement and getting people engaged from the beginning. So this idea that there was a couple of years where the city and its partner OSEG were thinking about this and what they could do, and really had appeared to have very little interest in what the public had to say about it. But I just that point about this 2.0 being initiated by OSEG because they're losing money. And one of the comments that I've heard, I'd say off the record from the city, is there seems to be some fear that what would they do if OSEG walked away from this partnership? Um, is that something that you would worry about? Would the city be able to adapt and find a new way forward without OSEG if they chose to do that?
Yeah, so a couple things, and I think the fear of OSEG walking, if they follow through on their, I'll say unspoken threat, but I think it's a pretty clear threat that they would walk if they don't get this deal to figure out how to stop losing money. It's a pretty I guess staff have looked at their losses over the last number of years, and in terms of the cost of doing nothing, which they've put in the front window, I feel like that's been a bit of a fear factor, a strategy to put fear in the minds of everyone, councillors included, of course. And basically they've said if on average OSEG has lost $10 million a year, then if there are 40 years left in the deal, that's equivalent to, it's going to cost us $400 million a year, or $40 million in total. And which is it's so simplistic and nonsensical to, I mean, it's not, there's no credibility to that. To say that looking backwards and any startup situation, any startup business generally expects to lose money in the first few years of operation before becoming cash positive. So why staff would include those first number of years, COVID years? Sorry, in fact, I don't think they did include COVID years in their very simplistic calculation, but including those early years where you expect losses, doesn't make any sense. And when you have Ernst & Young's forecast going forward to say we're now into break-even mode, and in the future, small profits, some profitability is expected, why you would not use that is, I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that question is. I can only imagine. But it should, to me, if you're going to use that approach, you should use their numbers and say, well, if OSEG walks and we have to take it on our own, we're looking at a break-even situation. So to me, that says it'll cost us zero because it'll be break even going forward. We won't get the profits that were promised, but neither are we likely to lose money. Will it be a disruption? Yes, of course. Is that an untenable situation for the city to step in and take over those operations? I don't think so. I think there are other models that could easily be, not, I shouldn't say easily, but other models that could be looked at to manage Lansdowne, getting a nonprofit organization board to come in and manage Lansdowne. OSEG, they talk about their love of the teams and their love of sport, and that's why they're here. That's fantastic. They don't have to be part of a partnership with the city to run the teams. So why they would just take all their marbles and leave, it seems to me an empty threat. I think there are ways. I don't think it's an impossibility at all.
Okay. I want to come back to timing because, again, you mentioned that this proposal was first really brought up in 2019, 2020, and first came to public light in 2022, and then where the public saw it, got to comment on it, and again the public got to comment on it in 2023 when the big staff report came out. Um, we have not seen any updated financial projections since 2023. Is it fair to say that a lot's happened since then? That do we have confidence that even the assumptions that underlie the model still make sense 2 years later?
Well, I guess I don't have any reason. I can't say either way, I suppose, because I haven't seen, as you say, we haven't seen any new numbers. What I have heard is OSEG continue to say how well they're doing, how well the retail leasing business that they run at Lansdowne, how well that is doing. And the retail leasing business actually makes money. So, in fact, the teams to date have not made money. The facilities, of course, lose money. So the retail leasing business is all important in terms of the financial sustainability of Lansdowne. And OSEG, for, since the beginning, for years now, have told us, and I've been very skeptical of this, but have told us that the retail leasing business has done well, is doing well, and they project it to do that much better. So I'll take them at their word and say, and I have no reason to think that that what Ernst & Young was projecting in terms of them being into this break-even transitioning to profitability territory, I have no reason to think that there's any that something different is happening.
Okay. Now, the Lansdowne 2.0 projections, and this is going back to 2023, and which Ernst & Young commented on. You're right that it said that retail would be very profitable. In fact, I think the number was about over 40 years, retail would generate about $1 billion in profit, not revenue, but profit that would be shared among the partner and the city. And that would generate about $350 million in distributions to the city. So $350 million that we would use to pay down debt and cover other costs. How confident are you that that $350 million will come through?
Well, I think I think most reasonable people would look at a forecast for retail or anything similar and say anything beyond, I don't know, a 5 to 10 year forecast is simply not credible. I mean, and even that being said, the waterfall proceeds, which is basically just the profit sharing with the city, even if you accept that those projections, they're not expected to come in until the latter part of the 40-year deal. The city expects to see next to nothing in the first 25 years. And then it's only then that we expect to see the retail start to kick up. So we're relying, we will be taking on massive amount of debt. City taxpayers will be servicing that debt for 10 to 15 years. And then it's only then that we'll start to see possibly, possibly, if it comes through, something coming back from the waterfall. Ernst and Young talked about those forecasts and I don't have their exact words, but I think it seemed fairly clear to me. And again, if you talk to people who are involved in retail forecasting, anything that's going to, I mean, they had to put together a forecast for the life of the agreement, but it's extremely risky. And Ernst and Young did talk about the risk associated with that forecast. So they've noted it, but I don't believe as part of the remit there was no further analysis of, what does this mean? But it's clear if the proceeds don't show up, then taxpayers will continue to have to service this debt in large part.
Okay, and last question is actually around those debt payments, because I know that you've looked at the numbers very closely. And if I remember correctly, the city says that this will cost taxpayers $5 million a year. And as you point out, that is an average and it's backloaded. So in the short term, you mentioned 10 years where taxpayers will be much more on the hook than in theory they will be later. How much is the city planning for debt servicing in the short term, say the first 10 years? If you can just remind us of that number, and how much of that will be the taxpayer's responsibility. So again, for the first 10 years, because I know the city also come back and say, well, we've got these other revenue sources like rent and ticket surcharge. How important are those in the equation?
Yeah, well, I guess it's all pretty important, but so the city, the debt that the city will take on for this, the city and taxpayers are on the hook for that debt for the life of that debt. So just just to be crystal clear about that. So in the initial years, the waterfall will not be kicking off anything. The total debt service amount, the city says, I believe it's $16.4 million a year for the debt service. For some reason, they have separated out the $1 million, I think it's about $1 million, that will be in debt service required for the loan that they're taking out to build parking under one of the towers. I don't know why they separated out, perhaps to make that debt and debt service number look smaller. But that's $17.4 million in debt service annually for 40 years. In addition to that, the city will be using, I think it's $51 million upfront of taxpayer funds that could be used, contrary to many councillors I've spoken to who believe that all the money that is being put into Lansdowne can only be put into Lansdowne. There's $51 million that will be used right up front to go towards this project, and then the debt follows that. So the waterfall is a big component, a big contribution to paying off the debt, as is the property taxes. And the plan is to take 75% of the property taxes from the two towers and to basically allocate that to servicing the Lansdowne debt, which doesn't make any sense to me, because I don't see, as I've said before, if they only needed 25% of my taxes to actually go to the city for everything else that I as a resident consume, I'd be happy to have my tax bill reduced to 25% of what I'm paying right now. But they're saying, no, it's fine. It's totally fine. We can just take 75% of the property taxes. Those, 1,500 residents, will generate very little in terms of services requirements for the city. So 25% of their taxes are fine. We'll take the 75% of their property tax bill and use it to pay down the debt. I'll also mention, I think there is a risk that those towers, we're going to find out what the sale of the air rights looks like in the next few months. Have there been offers to buy those air rights for anything close to what the city was estimating? Time will tell. We'll find out. But then, when do those towers actually get built? They are scheduled to be built as soon as the arena the new arena is built, and then the city demolishes the existing arena, tears it down, the retail podium goes in and the towers go up. That's their plan. But is that the developer's plan? We know developers across the city have got approval for towers across the city. In many cases, they've been sitting on those approvals for years. They're not building. Is there anything, is there anything to believe? Are there any specific requirements that the city is able to impose on developers and a developer who may have bought these air rights, that they will actually build these towers anytime soon? We know that the condo market has absolutely tanked. So will that change? And then by, I think it's 2030, when the towers are supposed to go up, we'll see. But there's risk associated with that as well. And I don't think it's insignificant.
Okay. Carolyn, thank you very much for your delegation today.
I just want to say that from my point of view, my perspective on this is twofold, I would say. One is that with all the financial pressures that we've been having, I remember, was it probably a few months ago, earlier this year, Mayor Sutcliffe was on TV saying, "Oh, we have, we're going to need money. We're going to be looking at other levels of government because we're going to need money." Now we're looking to spend $500 million on a nice to have project, really. And that it clearly people don't want. And worse than that, we have major problems in this city. That the transit issue is just brutal. The fact that people cannot rely on the transit system is shameful. Okay. We have a homelessness issue. I live and social disorder issue. I live here in the market area, and it is painful what I see here every single day. Okay, these people that we are letting down by not housing them it's shameful. And to see what people see coming to this is the national capital. Okay, tourists come here and they see people going crazy, people being violent, excrement on sidewalks, tents popping up everywhere. And and this is what our tourists are seeing. I think the only reason we've got tourists coming right now is because people aren't going to the States. But, as time goes on, people are going to stop wanting to come to this city because it is becoming a ghetto down here. So it is horribly irresponsible, horribly shameful to be spending $500 million on a project that really doesn't need to go ahead. We just renovated this thing. Was it 9 years ago? It's just ridiculous. And it's it's a park, and we're turning it into a condominium money grab. It's just not right. And not only that, but the design is horrible. It is pedestrian at best. It is not indicative of what the national capital should be building. We have some pretty wonderful buildings here. Our art galleries here, the convention center. There's some really great designs, but the design that's been put forth for this is pathetic. We could have had a competition with the architecture school here, and they could have drawn something on a napkin that would have been way better than what they've come up with. So and then I used to love going to sit on the berm and watch concerts. Well, if we're going to be losing half of the berm, it's just not right for the people. It seems like, I love the term. Somebody said the Ottawa oligarchy. It seems like it's aimed for them and not for the citizenry. So honestly, these kind of projects, and also too for design, really, I also mentioned, somebody mentioned that it shouldn't even be in Lansdowne. Like, move it to an area that has better transit, fix the transit also, but make it available for the people. It doesn't need to be in Lansdowne. The people in the glebe in that area were affected in Lansdowne 1. They're going to be massively affected with Lansdowne 2. So I'm sure a lot of people don't want that either in that neighborhood. So it's just so tone deaf of the city to be pushing this through. I think it is absolutely wrong, irresponsible, shameless. And great, if Mark Carney and Rob Ford all of a sudden give us all kinds of money, then maybe we can look at it. But also look at the design. Like it's just poorly planned, poorly done, and it just seems like we're giving all our taxpayer money to a small group of people to benefit from, and I just find it wrong in so many ways.
Keith, thanks for your delegation. You mentioned the federal and the provincial governments, Carney and Ford, and you'll remember that the proposal it counts on $20 million of support from higher levels of government. Do you think that's looking particularly realistic at this point?
Well, so that's part of the problem right now is we're living in such an uncertain world right now. Mark was saying that we might have to give up, on a lot of things because we don't know, what our situation will be like right now. We can't count on the feds being able to hand us money. I mean, maybe they will, but to me, if I was to draw an analogy, if you were living on a boat and you had a bunch of holes in the hull, but you decided you wanted to renovate the officers' lounge instead, for a second time, by the way, you would say, that doesn't make sense. Like, shouldn't you be fixing the holes in the boat? Well, we should be fixing our transit. We should be fixing the affordability issues and the homelessness issues down here, the social disorders, because it affects the whole city. I mean, yes, it affects the neighborhood here. Walking on Rideau is like walking in a ghetto right now. But if we start losing tax dollars to Ottawa, everybody will be affected, even out in Barhaven or any of the suburbs. If we are getting less money coming in, we will be all affected. So even if we do get some money from the feds, it's not going to be enough to make this project. And it isn't even a good project. So, somebody was saying that, well, if OSEG was to leave, well, we could have other options. Well, fine. I think that to throw our hat onto one option only, I think is so irresponsible. And as a taxpayer and Ottawa citizen, it's to me it's outrageous that what's happening,
Yeah.
and it's shameful because I think if I look at worldwide and the things that other countries and cities build, it's boring what they're planning. It's mind numbing to me. Anyways.
Yeah. Keith, I got one other question I want to ask you about, and that's you raised the issue of the fact that this is a park, and I think people forget that, right? Lansdowne Park is a park, and what I worry about is we are actually setting a bit of a precedent for parks throughout the
Yeah.
city. We've all got a conception of what a park is,
Mhm.
and what I think there's a legitimate fear is every park throughout the city now potentially up for reinterpretation. I mean, do you think that's a fair?
Privatization.
Yeah, do you think that's a fair criticism or a fair concern?
Absolutely. That's one of the main reasons why I think it's a bad project because it's a model for privatizing all our public space. I'm not saying that private corporations or businesses can have a role to play. They can and should. But the way this seems to be run, the way this seems to be programmed, is that it's corporation first and the citizenry second, and that's not right.
Okay. Keith, thanks very much for your delegation today. Thank you again for being here today and for your engagement. And I'll look forward to reconnecting with many of you very soon. Justin, thank you very much for coming today to this People's Committee and to delegate on the issue of Lansdowne. The floor is yours for 5 minutes. Please go ahead with your delegation.
Thank you, Neil, for having me. My thoughts on Lansdowne. From what I understand from this project, there's a cost of almost $500 million. I think the precise number is like 493 million. And The greatest tasks that are happening out of this are essentially tearing down and shrinking the occupancy of a football stadium and a hockey arena. When you think about how much money is being spent on that, that doesn't really sit well with me. Ottawa has challenges with transit funding, it has challenges with homelessness, and this has only been accelerating through the pandemic. Given these challenges, it doesn't feel like this is a good time to prioritize sports facilities, and I will emphasize prioritizing making sports facilities less functional. Another frustrating point is that the mayor refuses to hold a public referendum. I'm sure other cities have their issues, but it seems like Calgary, Montreal, a few other cities have held public referendums when it came time to spending such a high number on sports facilities, and it makes me question why Sutcliffe is so against the same thing for Ottawa. I have a message for Mayor Sutcliffe. I encourage you to reconsider your decision and allow a citywide referendum for Lansdowne 2.0. I agree that the City of Ottawa residents deserve a chance to decide where their tax dollars go, and if you don't allow the public to decide where $500 million of their tax money is spent, I guarantee this is going to come up next year when the next municipal elections come up, and I feel that this may affect your chances of being reelected as mayor. That concludes my 2 cents. Thank you for having me, Neil.
Justin, thank you very much for your delegation. And I want to pick up on a couple of the points that you raised, starting with, you asked the question, why is the mayor so against a referendum?
Mm-hmm.
And, we've heard this from the mayor. We've heard it from some other city councilors too, that are opposed to the referendum. And they seem to be people that are also aligned with the proposals for Lansdowne itself. So if you were to speculate, why do you think we're, seeing such hostility towards a referendum?
Honestly, all I've read is potentially conspiracy theories. So about giving money to builders to accelerate housing, I'll frame it more positively than what I've read online. The positive version is to give money to builders to accelerate housing development, to maybe make that more of a larger scale third place for the city.
Mm-hmm.
I could see benefits to investing more in having greater facilities if we had the money available to do so. But in my opinion, there are other things that need more important funding.
Yeah. Can I ask Justin, do you think there's a concern that they have that if this went to a referendum, it may not fall in their favor? That, we've heard back to almost 2 years ago now, there was the city had some polling done that indicated that the majority of people in the city of Ottawa were in favor of redoing Lansdowne. Now, it didn't talk about what the cost of that would be. It didn't talk about opportunity costs. Do you think those numbers are credible? Is that maybe the fear, that they're worried that, frankly, the people of Ottawa just don't want this?
I think that people wouldn't be against the idea of Lansdowne upgrades in general, but I think that if they know how much it costs them, if they know how much how much of their property taxes are going to be spent, I think they would not want this, and they would not be happy with the direction that the current municipal government is going.
Okay, and you mentioned some of the other priorities. You mentioned transit, you mentioned housing as areas where we could be alternatively spending this money. I guess there's no shortage of other priorities that we could be spending this money on also, right?
I agree. There definitely isn't.
Okay. Can I just close with one question? And I've been asking this to all the delegates, and that's if you were to think about your thoughts on the Lansdowne proposal, and if you were to try to summarize them in, say, one sentence or even like one phrase, how would you describe this Lansdowne proposal to me?
Essentially, the city is trying to modernize Lansdowne, but in a way that's style over substance and is no business being this costly to the taxpayers.
Great. Okay. Justin, thank you very much for your public delegation today. Rianne, thanks for coming to join the People's Committee. You have 5 minutes to delegate. The floor is yours.
Okay. My name is Rianne Mahan. I live in the Glebe, but Lansdowne 2.0 is not a problem only for Glebe residents. It's a risky and expensive undertaking for all Ottawa taxpayers, as others who have spoken before the People's Committee have persuasively documented. I want, however, to focus on a more specific issue, the plans to tear down TD Place, an arena that currently seats over 8,000 people, and replace it with a substantially smaller one. This is a problem for fans of the PWHL's Ottawa Charge, among others, who come from all over the city and beyond. A 2-year-old team, the Charge quickly won the hearts of Ottawa, and mine among them. I'd not been interested in hockey for years, but from the first Ottawa and a Charge game in 2024, I was hooked. I'm now a second-year season ticket holder and received a Charge jersey from my family for Mother's Day. From the start, the team's been drawing on an average of 7,000 fans to games, even during snowstorms. The fans are a diverse and friendly group, girls and boys, with their families and babies too, seniors, girls and boys hockey teams from across the regions. With reasonably priced tickets, it was accessible to people from all walks of life, and they came and they cheered. As Amy Shear, the PWHL's Vice President of Business Operations, noted, Charge fans come with their kazoos and they blast their lungs out, and they certainly do. When Charge made the playoffs this year, the city also officially embraced the team, temporarily renaming a strip of Bank Street Charge Avenue and raising the Charge flag at City Hall. Yet City Council continues to forge ahead with plans for a new, smaller arena, replacing the one that currently seats 8,500 with one that has general admission seats for only 5,000, plus 800 expensive box seats, and standing room if you want to stand during a hockey game for 750. In other words, 3,000 fewer fans would be able to attend in the proposed arena, and following the laws of supply and demand, those who do will pay higher prices for the tickets. Many fans are not aware of these plans, as we found out when we speaking with numerous fans who were on their way to the game. We actually were canvassing, and it was like 9 out of 10 people we talked to had no idea that this was happening. Okay, so endorsing the plan to tear down an arena that has another 40 years of life in it and replace it with a shiny new but substantially smaller one, the PWHL and the city underestimated the league's success and the growth of women's professional sport in general. As a PWHL advisory board member noted, the initial project for attendance was a mere 1,000 fans per game. Thus, Toronto and Montreal PWHL teams were originally allocated smaller arenas like Toronto's Mattamy Athletic Centre, which seats for only 3,000 people. Both teams this year moved to more appropriate sized arenas. Ottawa was lucky from the start. We got the TD Centre and quickly moved to fill it. In other words, the initial assumption to our decision to support a new smaller arena was based on what turned out to be faulty assumptions. It's not too late to change the city's position. Since taxpayers are footing the bill, we must have a say in the decision. We need to let our councillors and the mayor know that thousands of Ottawa citizens do not want to be shut out of watching their team play, priced out or left without seats. Thank you. And I need a drink.
Okay. Rianne, thank you very much for your delegation. You talked about the Ottawa Charge, and I have to say that I went to see my first Charge game this year because I'd heard so much about it and heard about all the excitement and wanted to experience it firsthand. And that sort of electric atmosphere that you described, I saw that firsthand. I wonder if you can talk about what you think, how you think that dynamic might or might not change in a new arena. You mentioned that there's lots of families that there's a diversity of people. How do you think that might change in this new configuration that's proposed?
Well, first of all, there'll be far fewer of us, so there'll be you won't be maybe having invitations to these girls teams that get to watch and see what they could become as hockey players. The boxes. 800 will create a class division, which currently doesn't exist. You sit side by side with all kinds of people. And that's actually what makes it a really wonderful community experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's that is disturbing to hear.
And the Canadian Tire Center, they have one game out there. It was awful. It's
is that
a
so?
cavern.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same kind of feel of really being part of something.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned
I'd never go there again.
That I think you mentioned that the charge regularly get attendance about 7,000 people.
Yep.
And
at the final, they sold out for 8,500.
Right, right. Okay. Can I? I'm really interested in hearing what you heard from the charge fans that were kind of unaware of the proposal. Like, you know, and I think that's fair that this is representative of people throughout the city that maybe have heard that there's something about Lansdowne 2.0, but don't really know any of the details. So when you explain what was happening to charge fans that were new to this, how would you characterize their response?
They were shocked. They had no idea that. I think what happens is that people tend to think, oh, they're complaining about Lansdowne 2.0 is just a bunch of NIMBYs in the glebe, and don't understand that as taxpayers, it's certainly going to affect them in a negative way. But also, I mean, it was really striking. I said 9 out of 10 people we talked to had no idea, and they were really negatively impressed. They said, what?
Yeah, okay. Can I ask a final question? And that is, if you were to think about the Lansdowne 2.0 proposal, and if you were to try to summarize your thoughts down to one sentence or like even one phrase, what would it be?
Can I say god awful?
You certainly can.
No, it's really a disaster, and I just hope. I mean, the work you've been doing to combat it is really important. The work that several councillors are doing to combat it is really important. I think we have a chance to defeat it. We've got to work hard to do it, but I think we can do it. And I think in some ways the arena is a soft underbelly. Like a lot of people that don't normally identify with Lansdowne do through the hockey games.
Yeah, that's right, and it's true. It's the arrival of the charge, and as you mentioned, which I didn't realize that the original estimate was only for 1,000 spectators a game.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just been this revelation for so many people, so many of us, right?
Yep.
And it's been just a wonderful experience, and it is at real risk by what is being proposed here.
Yeah, we could actually end up losing the team, I think.
That's a real risk, yeah. Rianne, thank you very much for your delegation today.
Okay, well, good. Keep up the good work. Nice to meet you.
And likewise. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So, Ruth, if I may say, if you would like to begin, please, you've got 5 minutes for your delegation.
Okay. To the mayor and the councillors, I've been watching with great concern how this Lansdowne 2 process has been proceeding. I find very, very citizen unfriendly and almost undemocratic in the process. We start with a public space and are ending up with a privately developed condos and chain stores, all with the same consortium that did not meet their promises in the first time round of small boutique shops, no traffic problems with games, and on budget, etc., etc., etc. I could go on. Nor will they this time. With where is all the meaningful citizen input on the final decision? Where is the consideration of other developers and landscape architects with parkland ideas? I'm supportive of development, but meaningful, thoughtful development that has all the players' input involved, not just developers and city hall councillors. What we are getting is sterile, large box canyons that look like stacked air conditioners with no community feeling or interest. I have seen the outside budget reviews with credible economic analysis and auditors, etc., and the numbers do not add up to any profit. In fact, it looks like the Ottawa taxpayer will be on the hook for the deficit. Adding in hotel revenues when the hotel may not even be built is false accounting.
You have a UNESCO World Heritage Site and the oldest continually operating canal on this northern continent. And we can barely see it from Bank Street for all the development that has been erected by the road. One is fortunate to get a glimpse of it on the bridge or by the last remaining green space that we have in the park. How sad. Think Copenhagen's, Needham, Bruges, and Venice, with bustling waterfronts and entertainment areas for all ages and boat tours. We don't have that. We have, and cafes and communities. We are the capital city of Canada with so much potential, and we've ruined the canal potential there. Lansdowne Park, who is this council trying to fool? Thank you.
Ruth, thank you for your delegation today. Can I ask a couple of follow-up questions? And I'd like to begin with a point that you raised around the consideration of other developers and other stakeholders in this process. And then you also referenced the fact that we have ended up with this very sterile park that really doesn't have a lot of interest to community members. Just there really isn't a lot of space there. Why do you think we're in the situation we're in? And like how should it have been different? This idea that you mentioned about the consideration of other, of others. So like who's been driving this and who's being excluded?
Well, I think that the developers in City Hall councillors have been driving this, and inside planners, and who should be doing it is it should be the input of a lot more input from the citizens. We're the stakeholders, we're the ones that own that park. So it's supposed to be Lansdowne Public Park. It's supposed to be public facilities, and it looks to me like we're losing it all. Yeah, the ground underneath will still be Lansdowne Park, but there won't be any green space for families to enjoy. I think it's so sad.
Okay, can I ask what that consultation could look like in a better world, let's say? Because I think the city would argue that they've had a number of events where people, whether it's status updates or whether it's information nights or whatever terminology they use, they would say we've had a number of opportunities for people to engage. Do you think those engagement processes have been meaningful? How could they have been better done?
Well, first of all, I think that they need to extend more publicity on them. They need to have media coverage of when they're going to be much better. And on top of that, I guess in this whole process, questions haven't been answered. I don't get answers when I ask them. I get, even my own counselor, I'm trying, I have to look through it. It's very, very, the paperwork and the budgeting and things are very complex. Well, it should be readable. It's almost indecipherable. And the other thing is that with the last one, the first one, we didn't have any outside public consultation, and people were upset about that. And we've done it again this time, and just don't seem to learn from it.
Well, can I ask, would you characterize these consultation events that have taken place? You talked about the lack of publicity around them, but would you say they were genuine, like two-way engagement processes, or were they more one-way? Like, were they if someone got to the event, was it satisfactory or could it have been improved?
I think it could have been improved a lot. First of all, they really don't address people's criticisms of it. And, they'll say they'll take them in consideration. Well, no, they're not taking anything into consideration. A lot of citizens said, we don't want these big mammoth buildings there. We want some more, user-friendly community areas. And that hasn't been listened to. We said it the first time in Lansdowne 1, and they're doing the same thing with Lansdowne 2. So obviously they haven't listened. It's all
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I end with a question that I've been asking all the delegates, and that if you were to try to summarize your thoughts on the Lansdowne 2.0 proposal into one sentence or even one phrase, like what would that be?
Into one sentence, I feel it's a sterile barricading development.
Okay. Ruth, thank you very much for your time today and for your delegation.
Thank you very much, Neil.
Okay, listen, have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.